We are. I'm sorry to say, I'm doing this from the administrative office of a theater where they're playing them right now. I'm supposed to do a Q&A afterwards, and the walls are incredibly thin. So I hope.
Oh, that's okay. We don't mind if it bleeds over.
So we might actually be
Okay, thank
listening.
you.
We
Sorry
might be
about that.
listening to your movie while we
Yeah,
talk.
it's a little preview. I'm glad you said that because one of my first thoughts was that this is such an audience movie that I was going to ask you if you had seen it with an audience because it's so. I just think audiences would go crazy for it. I mean, I found myself yelling out loud at it by myself. I mean, it's a very satisfying picture. And if anybody had told me that Bob Odenkirk would be the new Bruce Willis, I wouldn't have bought it.
I know.
He's great.
I'm so glad you guys like that. I mean, it really does mean a lot. I'm not exaggerating in the slightest. I'm a little starstruck. I must add. I did write to Josh yesterday. It's thank you for inviting me. I'm a longtime listener. Haven't heard every single one, but I've heard quite a few. And I don't really listen to podcasts. And your stuff really is.
We don't listen
fantastic.
to them either, which is why we're doing this one.
It's. I guess we should. Thank you. I should say we are with the director Ilya Naishuller, who emailed me about 2 years ago and said I'd love to be on the show, and I said, well, go off and make a great action movie that surprises and startles us.
Well, he made Hardcore Henry. Come on,
I know.
That's a great action movie.
This is a lie, Joe. He didn't actually email me 2 years ago. Going along with a bit is not something Joe does.
I see. Okay. Well, not if I'm not informed about it in advance.
I'm trusting your comic chops. It's
Oh, well, there you go. A lot of studios have gone under doing that.
This is why Joe Dante can't be the next great action hero. This is The Movies That Made Me, with your hosts, Josh Olson
and Joe Dante.
But Ilya's made a film that's just come out called. When I saw the trailer, I hadn't even seen the trailer. I just saw what it was, and I thought this is they brought back Mr. Show. Bob Odenkirk is doing a bit, and then I saw the trailer and I went, "Oh, this could be." And then I saw the film, but it truly who came up with. Bob Odenkirk is the great action hero of 2021. Let's just say that. And we don't, as you know, Ilya, we don't talk to our guests about their work. But I got to ask, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Was this? Did somebody go, "Oh my God, we need to put Bob in an action film," or did Steven Seagal drop out and Bob was?
It was a situation that occurred in Bob's house 10 years ago that prompted the first seed that later became this film. Bob had an intruder, a methed up guy in the basement. It's quite a freaky story where they go down. They live in California and LA, and they went down for breakfast one day, and his son comes up from the basement and says, "Dad, there's somebody in the basement." And Bob walks down and there's a naked guy with his back to him. Very zombie intro movie style situation. And the guy doesn't react to any words. So Bob backs up the stairs, closes the door with a key, and calls the cops as any of us would have done. And when the cops showed up, they took 5 officers to wrangle that guy up the stairs and out of the house. And the cop says, "Well, you did the right thing. But, it was my family." And Bob felt was very saddened by that because he did the right thing. He did the right thing.
Yes.
Yeah. But the question came, what if he was a character? What if there was a character that had the same situation he could have handled by himself, but for some reason held himself back? And that was the.
But that's solved so elegantly in your screenplay. I mean, the reason why he doesn't bash in the heads of the people who come into the house is explained very intelligently. And of course, his kids think he's a wuss, and he's why didn't you hit her with a golf club and all that. And then of course by the end of the picture, I think they have a somewhat different view of him.
might regret that. But yeah, also, and obviously, everyone in the movie except him has seen too many movies like nobody is sort of the problem, because, of course, what Bob did in real life is the only rational thing to do. But
but anyway, it's got tremendous action sequences. And the scene on the bus is great. The idea of saving the guy's life by putting the straw in his neck, which of course ends up getting him in more trouble, it's a really, really well made movie. And it's not exactly a true to life movie where anybody could do what this guy's doing, but it's so satisfying in a Billy Jack kind of way that I think audiences would really go nuts for it.
Thank you. I've watched it a few times. There was a press screening, and you very rarely get the press to applaud the film, and they did. So I was kind of thinking, because you make a movie and you don't really know if it's that good or that great until people see it, and you see the crowd and you feel the energy. And I locked the movie in last August, and we're waiting for this release. And I'm very lucky that Universal decided to really roll it out in theaters, considering all the other options that were on the table. But I was talking to Bob about this. We were thinking that we feel like we did a good job. We did the best we could with what we were given, and then you watch it with the press, and you watch it with the premiere, and it just feels. I'm a little. What's the right term? I'm a little overwhelmed with the reactions thus far, the reviews and what people are saying on social, because it came out today. Today's the first, yesterday was the first day of release. It comes out in Russia a week before the States release. And it's been fantastic. It's a strange feeling.
It's a very satisfying feeling, though, to see something
Not complaining.
You've done, to see something that you've done and see that people actually understand it and get it, and enjoy it.
It's crazy. Yeah. I'm definitely savoring the moment.
Well, it's fantastic. And Joe, we've just blown our mandate out the window. We've been talking about the guy's movie for like 10 minutes now.
Come on, it hasn't come out. Nobody knows what it is.
No, well, they will when this drops, but I'll cut all of that, because we never do that. Nobody wants to hear that. So I'm not gonna. But Ilya, so I really it was it is just one of the joys of this show, is you get to sort of, you see a film from someone you like, and you're like, oh, I want to pick his brain. What kind of movies, created this person? And here you are, and we get to ask you that. So
I'm excited to be here.
Although I realize in retrospect now, I should have thought about it a little more. Sometimes you want to do something thematic. I should have made you come up with a list of your favorite movies where comedians give great performances in. Someone should do that.
All right. Okay, let's reschedule for tomorrow. That is a great
idea. That is a fun idea. But not that, by the way, not that nobody isn't hilarious. And it's got its share of laughs.
It's got great villains too, which is very important.
Villains. We're doing it. I didn't even bring up Christopher Lloyd. Let's move on. Let's talk about it.
Now, did you shoot that in Russia?
Oh,
no. It was all Winnipeg, which is as cold as Russia.
Oh, wow. Yeah, boy.
Canada. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. A lot of bang for your buck there.
All right. Okay. What? I'll stop. What?
If he starts with Guy Madden's My Winnipeg, that would be.
Name some movies.
All right.
Let's do this.
This obviously it's super tough list to come up with things. But it's funny. I have to open it up because I already forgot what I picked. Isn't that when we started this, I remember thinking, oh, this will be fun. And then, more and more guests say what you've said. And every now and then somebody goes, oh, Josh and Joe, you should do one where you talk to each other about your 10 favorite movies. I'm just like, I don't want to do that much. I don't want to do that much work. I don't know how I can. I don't know how I can do that.
That was the whole allure of the podcast, is the guests do the work.
The guests do the work.
We just prod them along.
Exactly.
I opened up my list. And it's again super tough list. And everybody that comes on your show, I'm sure worries about trying to come off more knowledgeable and more filmic library in their mind.
Okay, which we just really want to get away from that.
But that's not important. What's important is what the movies mean to them and how it affects their work.
Yeah.
So I decided to drop the pretentiousness. I don't think there's anything pretentious.
Well, we'll be the judge of that, Ilya.
Fine. I'll take it. So there's no order. I should have done.
Yeah, just any order is fine.
You know what? Let's go. Usual Suspects. Usual Suspects. First off the list. And Usual Suspects. I think it was 94 and 95. So I must have been 12. I remember seeing the trailer for it. I lived in England at the time. I was very lucky that I'm from the Soviet Union, from Russia, but back then it was the Soviet Union. And I guess it's worth mentioning that the reason I got into movies and just loving movies was that my dad was a paramedic, my mom was a surgeon, and my dad's first business, he would be selling pirate VHS tapes out of the ambulance because he didn't have legal VHS tapes. There's no VHS players or tapes around. So there was all pirate. They were all voiced by one guy who'd do live translating, be like, and now the character is going into the thing. And they won't be their English wouldn't be perfect. The jokes would be mostly improvised because we wouldn't get like. I remember we always used to laugh at much later on when we realized there's no dude called ASAP because they said call me ASAP and the guy would say call me ASAP. It is me ASAP. And we'd be like, who is this ASAP guy? He's not in where is he?
He's in all these movies.
Exactly. He's like this, what's his fixation in Hollywood with ASAP? But we lived in a 1-room apartment and we'd have tons of boxes, floor to ceiling of these VHS tapes that'd be like 3 or 4 movies per tape. Obviously some movies would be cut off and it'd be the most craziest possible combinations. It would be Top Gun with a Disney cartoon followed by Playboy Playmate of the Year. And my parents never censored me. The only thing my mom said is like, don't watch the erotic stuff. And I'd be like, I won't. So I just, watched everything there. And is my personal library, which is crazy in the 80s to have this, all this stuff. But then as a little older, my dad started he stopped doing the pirate stuff and the Soviet Union started to fall apart and he got into business and he shipped me off to England. And I was very lucky in that I got this Western education from 8 to 14. I was surrounded by a completely different environment. None of this gray, dull thing that I was surrounded by in Moscow. And the only thing I was familiar were movies. So my highlight in London was going to the Blockbuster. Back then it was called, before Blockbuster in England, it was called, I think, Hertz, like they rent a car, but it was rent a video, if I'm not mistaken. And then, so ideal evening would be a Pizza Hut and films. So I think The Usual Suspects came about when I was about 11. I remember seeing the trailer for it, and I've always loved these sort of slightly grimy adult stories about the underworld, and what can be more underworldy than Kaiser Soze. Yeah. So I remember just renting that, and I'm pretty sure I didn't follow it as well as I could follow it now, but I loved it. I loved this myth. I loved the phenomenal cast of these 5 guys that, it really is just. I realized every time I'm looking for a film reading script, I'm always looking for an ensemble piece. And when I started to think about it, it's because of The Usual Suspects. And another one on my list is my memory is so goddamn bad. Royal Tenenbaums. I'm sorry. And I can't wait to get my hands on a film where there will be, a possibility to get some fantastic actors to really play off each other. And that's what The Usual Suspects did. Plus it had great episodic action. There was no action scenes to speak of, but there were these great little robberies, just, 3-4 shots. And that's all you need to really sell an action scene. And, I ended up being this action dude, but I'm not really. All the scripts I wrote before hardcore were proper films, and they were character driven. They had, deeper stories, but the POV music video worked for me. And I got this call saying, let's do a feature of that. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to do proper films. And then Timur, my producer, I said, Ilya, would you like to see a great POV action film up on the big screen? And I said, I would. He said, we should go make it. And I was like, that makes perfect sense. And I thought to myself, I'll go shoot that thing and then I'll be getting B-level scripts for the rest of my life. But you know what? I enjoy the process. I think it'll be a great thing and possibly will make something special. Let's go for it. But in the back of my head was always this feeling I want to do a proper crime movie that has a phenomenal cast and has all these elements where you don't really divulge too much, but you get hints that tell you there's a much bigger world out there. And it's when you're introduced to these characters, these criminals, career criminals who really know what they're doing, and you understand even they are scared of the big bad, that big bad is certainly got to be a really big bad. So, especially we didn't know Kevin Spacey at that point. Just so we didn't know him in 7, where it did. I think by 7 everybody knew Kevin, and part of the reason I don't really want to watch Usual Suspects again is because of all the things that happened with Spacey and all the allegations towards Bryan Singer. I haven't watched it since then. I'm like, do I really care? And I think I do. So that kind of sucks. But on the other hand, we got Chris McQuarrie, who's now kicking ass as a director, making movies I truly enjoy. So we got there was a lot of mileage that I personally got from The Usual Suspects. A lot of, I guess, inspiration.
It was such
I want to watch it again.
Yeah, no, I'm look, I think Joe and I tend to abide by the same credo here, which is love the work, hate the jerk. I don't have to have those gentlemen over to my house or proclaim.
Listen, if all the movie directors who did bad things in their lives were suddenly erased, there'd be no movies.
There'd be 3, Joe, and they'd be terrible. That's the problem. Except for yours, there'd be the entire Joe Dante canon would still be available. But
that is a very good point. I think Bill Hicks used to say that that was part of his stand-up. I think it was in Revelations when he says, if people who are against drugs, they should go burn their entire fucking record collection.
Yeah, go burn your record collection. Exactly.
It's just, yeah.
Yes. A Bill Hicks fan, no less. We could do an entire episode of Bill Hicks. That'd be.
I'd listen to that as well.
Yeah.
Non-stop good ideas here today.
Well, you'll have to come back for all of those. By the way, would he have made a great action hero?
I think, yeah, I think so. I think the because we got lucky with Bob because he was old. He took the 2 years to train. Again, we're not talking about my movie. I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Hint, hint, wink, wink. But it could have been made with someone who wasn't so physically, ready to get ripped and do all, 2 years of hard work. Would I watch a Bill Hicks action movie? I definitely would. I mean, it would be hilarious. It would be a perfect action comedy because, his delivery and his outlook and everything, especially if he'd have a hand in writing it.
Yeah.
That would make it something very watchable.
Yes, that would be great. Sorry, I digress. And we talked about your film. Joe's going to dock me much pay this week.
You can't get away from it. That's why these people are here.
I like to think they like an escape from the promotional grind to come chat with us. But anyway, what is next, sir?
Next on the list is the Royal Tenenbaums,
yes.
which is by far my favorite Wes Anderson movie. And my story began with that film where I switched on my dad. I used to always watch films with my dad. We used to, rent and buy or, go to the theaters, which we can't really do anymore because all the great storytelling is migrated onto streamers and there's not much reason for me to take my dad out to the movies. And I'm not going to talk about my movie, but that was the goal with that one. So I got a note from a studio saying you got to bring up nobody every 5 minutes or there's no bonus. So look, I need the money. Okay. I need the money. Rent is expensive in Moscow.
As I say, and don't worry, I'm going to delete every reference to it. I'll just
love it. Perfect.
Put an Ugo horn over.
So what I'll do is I'll start using the title of my movie in sentences, and it'll just be like, and I'll be like, hey guys, come on, it's there, kind of.
By the way, I would say, with the exception of you and me, nobody ranks Royal Tenenbaums as their favorite Wes Anderson film, but I do as well. I think we are. I love that.
You really think we're in the minority?
I think so. I think it gets. I don't know why. It's a film that people actually get angry about sometimes.
I think it's because they run the dog over at the end of the picture. It doesn't make people happy.
I don't know, but I cut off your story, and it was because I saw that with my father in a theater, and I think that certainly helped. But yeah,
unfortunately, I saw it at home, and I watched it the first time I put it on, and my dad definitely wasn't in the comedic kind of mindset, and I kind of watched it and I was like, I like the music because, as soon as there's the Clash, you can't go wrong. One of my favorite bands of all time. But I just didn't feel it. I felt it was being too quirky, and I was like, ah. And then one day, by the magic of narcotics, marijuana to be precise, I had nothing to watch. I'm like, you know what? Let's give it a shot. And I started watching it stoned, and I'm like, Ilya, you're an idiot. This is a complete masterpiece. And I stand by it. What is it, 20 years later? Maybe a little less, 16, 17. It really is the richness of the characters, the phenomenal casting. Again, hugely perfect. I don't know if you can be hugely perfect, but absolutely perfect casting choices. Everybody is just, there's not a single character that is not perfectly cast. There is not a single line that's there just to fill up screen time. It feels like it's very economical while still being so big in its dialogues. Amazing scenes cut to music, and I love. I'm a lot of people, especially here in Russia, think of me as a music video director first and foremost, which I don't mind because I love directing music videos. I think it's great training ground and for the directorial muscle, so to speak. But there's scenes that when Luke's character, I forgot his name at this point. I think it's Richie. I think it's Richie.
Or not that.
Yeah, the tennis player. Yeah, the tennis player.
Yeah.
When he says, "I'm going to kill myself tomorrow," and then Elliott Smith's song comes on, and he starts cutting his hand, and it's the montage of just the beautiful classic Wes Anderson shots. And I remember I just started crying. And I cry like a baby, and it's very easy to trigger my tears because I'm a real man. God damn it! But it's it's one of these. I'm talking about it now, and I'm smiling. When I think of The Usual Suspects, it gets a little somber in my mind. But with this, I feel like there's a sun in me, and the rays are hitting my insides. That's how good I feel when I think about that movie. And I remember watching, listening to all the soundtrack. There's so many. It's one of those movies where I think I can talk about it for a very long time. But I remember I was working on as a clapperboard. There was remember director Roland Joffe, who made The Mission and The Killing Fields. Roland Joffe did 2 movies back to back in Moscow, and they were not great movies. I don't think they were ever supposed to be, but he was getting a great paycheck, and there was Russian money. I'm not sure how shady it was, probably a little shady, but
there was a weird like horror film?
Yeah, I saw
Captivity.
it at a film festival.
Girl tied in a basement.
Yeah, it was the Girl in the Basement movie, which I can't remember the title of.
Captivity with Alicia Cuthbert.
Yeah, that was it.
And that was my first I worked on film sets before and on TV shows, just as, I brought coffee and I drove stars around. I did all sorts of odd jobs. I just really wanted to be as close as possible. Because in my mind, I had this thing of, well, you're going to be director by the time you're 27. Nobody's done it before. Of course, there are exceptions like Orson, etc. But generally, 27 is the magic number. So I thought, you know what? I want to, as I sit home and write and play music, and I did a lot of punk rock and I still do, but I want to go and see what it's like. I remember reading about Stanley Kubrick. First time he was ever on set was in the set of The Killing. And I was thinking, that's great, but am I sure that I'm going to be as great as Stanley on my first movie? Probably not. Chances are kind of slim. So let me go and see how things are made. And that Captivity experience was phenomenal because why did I jump to Captivity? I have no idea why. Oh, because first day of Captivity, I was working on a different movie, a Russian art house film, which is kind of cool. This guy walks in and says, "Hey, anybody here speak English?" I'm like, I do. It's pretty good. It's like, have you ever done clapboard duties? I was like, yeah.
How hard can that be?
Exactly. That's what I thought. So I go in and they're like, all right, come with us. So I told the director of the movie that I was working on, I was his driver and his assistant and what have you. I said, look, I have to do this. It's an American film. This is much closer to my heart. Please, and he was a bit of a mentor to me over the period I was working on that film in the summer. And he's like, I understand, go. I didn't think he liked me that much. Only now do I understand why he's like, yeah, go. God damn it. But I go over there and I meet the department heads, and I meet the sound department. There's a guy called Pavel Dovchak. And Pavel Dovchak, as soon as I see him, I'm like, hey, I know you. And he played the sound man in Wes Anderson's next film called The Aquatic Life of Steve Zissou.
Oh, Life Aquatic,
pronouncing it right.
Yeah.
Yes. And he played the sound man, and I realized, like, wait, that's him. And we started talking. Obviously, I'm like, how did that happen? Why were you in that? Why were you cast in the film? He's like, I wasn't cast. I was actually cast and I did the soundman duties while being in the shot. That was Wes's thing. That's what he wanted. He liked my look. So already I was super enamored with this possibility. So he gives me the world's
Saves
first.
money.
It absolutely does. He gives me the world's first electronic clapboard. He's like, this is $5,000 prototype. Please don't drop it. And he starts explaining what all the wires do, how you got to do that, connect to the camera. And I'm like, they're going to know that I'm an imposter. I have no idea. I'll be fired before the end of the day. And they told me, make sure you write with not with a permanent marker, which seems very obvious, except the first day I had to run to the bar to buy small bottles of vodka to wash away the permanent marker that I, almost killed that clapboard with. And at the end of the day, there was a lovely script supervisor woman from Britain, Emma, I forgot her last name. Emma, she was this, she comes up and says, Ilya, I have a feeling you have no idea what you're doing. And I was like, she's like, that's all right, I'll help you. And she did. And she explained everything. So I went and I worked on that movie, and that was a terrific experience. I'm sorry that I ramble and rant, but
that's great.
It is how it's part of the package why Royal Tenenbaums is so special, because I remember talking to Pavel and he would tell me about every single scene. It was such a pleasure working on this mediocre movie and listen. And every single break we had, I would just hang out with Pavel and he'd just tell me about how they shot those scenes, how he got the sound over I forgot the bridge in New York, where he's like, it's impossible to get great sound, yet we did it. That sound is real in that film. So ever since then, I was like, we got to have real sound. We got to have real sound. Unfortunately, not many soundmen are as good as Pavel. So usually quite a bit of the good old overdub. But
that was one of my, I started out working crew for several years before going into writing. And that was one of my favorite things is the stories you would get from people who had worked on just amazing, amazing films, to which for them, it was like, oh yeah, it's a job I did a couple of years ago. You're like, you worked on Once Upon a Time in America. What the?
Exactly as you described, it's exactly how I feel about things. When I meet these people, when I started working in America, and it would be, some guys worked on movies that I truly, truly love. Yeah. And like you said, to them, it's no biggie. Just another day at the office. But to me, I'm like, you just sit down and you tell me everything.
Yeah.
Everything. I think it really helps to be working in movies when you love movies. It really helps, because it's kind of hard work. It's not, we're not saying people in the hospital, we're not doctors, we're not, in the mine shaft breathing horrible stuff, but it is fairly stressful, as we all know. And that's part of the things that make it so much more enjoyable, is that you get to hear these fantastic stories about things that you love.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that there was a book many years ago, because I remember reading it on the airplane flying off to direct my little horror film, the one thing I did. And it was interviews with great filmmakers talking about their first time directing. And like the Coen brothers, everybody's in there. And you could just draw a line between the people who had been on sets before, who had worked crew, and they would walk on set as a director. And, they'd have anxiety, but they knew what was going on. They felt all right. And then you have the people who had never directed anything, never been on a set, never been near anything. And their stories were all about getting there on the first day and just like melting. I think
it's a complicated ecosystem. It's
intimidating.
Really,
also, you've got all these people, and you have to tell them what to do. And they're all looking at you like, well, okay, now what do we do? Well, I guess
you better have some answers.
Yeah.
And answers in such a way where they can actually understand what the hell you're trying to say.
Right.
So I'm incredibly happy they got to work with Jaffe twice, and he came back and did a fully Russian produced terrible film that had half foreign cast, half Russian. But Anton Yelchin was with us, which was fantastic. He was like a 16-year-old kid. He came out with his mother. He was incredibly sweet. His mother was great, and he would hang out with us. Anton was great. I was very saddened by his passing, because I thought one day it'd be great to meet with him on a film set, and this time, to work not as a translator, but as let's go make something good, Anton. So yeah, they're very unfortunate. But that experience with Roland was, I think, one of the things, and I'll tell you one quick story that really altered the way I look at things. On Captivity, obviously, the typical amount of time the stars are in their, we were shooting on Moscow, the biggest sound stages in Moscow, where, all the classic Soviet films were made. We had the huge sound stage, beautiful, beautiful set design of a New York mansion. And Alicia would spend most of her time in a dressing room because the set wasn't, why sit in the chair? So her chair was empty, and we had the Alicia Cuthbert chair, and I didn't really give a shit because I didn't know. So I'd sit in that chair all the time. Because why not? No one's around. Who's going to tell me? And Jaffe would walk past, and he'd be like, Ilya, don't fucking sit in that chair. And I'd be like, okay. And I'd stand up, and he'd walk away, and I'd sit back down because I was an idiot kid. And one day, I think he's had enough of it, and he pinched me by my ear, and he yanked me outside the stage, and he said, Ilya, I'm going to stop doing the accent now. He said, Ilya, I can't. It's impossible not to do the accent when thinking about Jaffe. But he said, Ilya, what you have to understand is that, okay, I'll stop. We have to understand that that's how undecided I can be. That's why it's weird that I work as a director. But he said, Ilya, you have to understand, if you are having a bad day and you're not in a good mood, the audience will never find out. If I'm in a bad mood, the audience, just barely maybe will find out. But if the star is in a bad mood, audience will. So stop fucking around with my star. And to this day, I've always loved actors because that, without them, we'd be shooting empty sets. It'd be beautiful little landscape shots. But it completely directed how I approach in dealing with the cast, whether they're stars or not. But the fact is, you want to make sure they're not distracted by bullshit. And I think what Jaffe did to me, I've passed on to a lot of people who had the same idiotic approach that I did back then. So,
a lot of our listeners listen to the show for tips on how to make movies, and I honestly, I have to say that use erasable marker and don't sit in the stars' chairs are 2 bits of actually really useful advice for filmmakers.
Glad to be of help. Vast wisdom has been shared.
Yes.
Should we hop on to the next one?
For sure. Yeah.
The next one is a very little known indie movie called No Country for Old Men.
I keep meaning to see that.
It's worth the time. I've always been a huge fan of it. It's hard to pick one Coen Brothers movie, obviously, but I've been a huge fan. I think the first movie I saw was Hudsucker Proxy. This was when I was in England. This must have been like 93, 94. And I wasn't sure I quite got that film. It felt a little too all over the place. But when I started catching up and, hearing everybody saying, you got to watch the Coen Brothers, I had a little group of film friends who were like, movies, let's watch everything. And, after you stop watching Goodfellas for the 10th time, you're like, what else is there? And Coen Brothers. And I had a kid in my school who was so eerily fascinated by Goodfellas. He would quote it nonstop. He was like 11. And it would be, and the guy works in film now in England. And I hope he hasn't hurt anybody. But yeah. So No Country for Old Men. I watched it, I think it was 2007, must have been.
Yeah.
My mom died that year. This was when we finished the second Jaffe film. My mom passed away after like a decade-long battle with cancer on and off. But she's always been, like a lot of mothers, key part of my life, super supportive, even when things didn't look great for, the whole filming thing. She was always like, go study movies, go work in movies. Good luck. I think she kind of always just loved films. She was the one that explained who the people on the set were to me when I was watching Goldfinger when I was 7. I was 7 when it clicked for me. When I was like, I think watching Goldfinger, I was like, Mom, so who does this? She was like, well, these are the actors, and there's a guy with a camera. I'm like, but who? Because I didn't know the word direct. And she's like, the director. I'm like, yeah, I guess. And she's like, well, that's the guy. He's called director, and he directs, and it's his kind of thing. Because she didn't know about the Hollywood studio system and how the director sometimes is part of the committee and etc. In the Soviet Union, director was king. So God, I guess, not king, which has its ups and downs, obviously. But I remember that summer going to fall. I think it was a fall movie. I started going out with a girl. It was my first relationship where I started living with somebody, and she had a horrible taste in films. Well, of course, everybody who, like when you drive me a car, everybody who drives faster than you is a fucking lunatic. Everyone goes slower is a noob, and they're etc. So the same thing. Everyone has different tastes, and you think your taste is good. She had horrible taste. I'm sure her taste was fine, but I was way more full of myself than I am now. Anyway, I took her to No Country for Old Men. And the first thing I noticed was that, of course, it looks great as it is with the genius DP that he is. But I'm watching the film, and I used to snack a lot until I realized at a certain point maybe I shouldn't be eating junk food all the time. So I usually took nachos, and I'm sitting in the theater, and I'm like, why am I feeling uncomfortable chewing on these nachos? Well, because there's no score, there's no songs. So I'm sitting there. My favorite, not favorite, but my biggest memory of that film experience was that I would put the nachos on my tongue and just soak them for 20 minutes at a pop, fully concentrating on the movie, and forgetting about the cheese dip. And I think in terms of why the movie is really inspirational, apart from being a tremendous piece of filmmaking with a very concise yet understandable theme and message, was that it's the way it treated action scenes and the way it treated what the characters were thinking during the action scene as well as outside the action scenes. I'll never forget. I think it was one of the most inspirational moments for me when there's a bit where I think Woody Harrelson. I haven't seen the movie for a while, so forgive me if I'm completely wrong with the character. But I think it's Woody Harrelson who's crossing the Mexican border, and he stops and he's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a close up, and he looks over the fence. He stands up on one of the little pillars.
Oh yeah, yes.
And he understands the case has to be that Josh Brolin's character must have dropped the case. Llewellyn, that's the name. Llewellyn must have dropped the case down before crossing because he would have been stopped. And I think, and everything I've written since then, and everything I've directed since then, even the absolutely ridiculously fast-paced hardcore, I understood the idea that let the audience wonder what the character is thinking. Give them that close-up, and you see the gears turning behind their eyes. And not every actor can do that, but if you have an actor who can stand still, and I think Fellini used to tell his actors to count back from 10, just to have something happening. Right. But you give an actor a moment, you do a close of him thinking, and then as the audience starts being intrigued and figuring out what is he thinking about, and then you give him the answer, which is much more interesting than what you thought it was going to be. That's an incredibly satisfying thing. I think it works a little bit like in pop music. Why pop music works is that, the first chorus comes in, you're like, all right, chorus. The second chorus comes in, and you're like, your brain starts guessing what's happening, what's going to come. Right. And it gets a dopamine hit of, ooh, I guessed it. High five, brain. So, and that's what I think that scene did to me. And every time I see it in the movies, and not many movies use it, but every time I see that approach, I just get so thrilled.
Yeah.
I think it makes me feel smarter than I am when I see that.
No, that's an amazing trick that film can do when you can do that. There's it's the hardest thing to get across too, but that's what montage is for, right? To show us three things, let us come to the right conclusion.
Which brings me to, I hate to bring it up again, but the editing on your movie is really good. I mean, all those brief montages of his life and doing his normal day-to-day stuff, which then tend to speed up as the picture goes on, is really, really works.
Thank you. I'm glad that was a sequence that was not in the script, and we felt, in fact, we got a studio note, and I have to say, every there's always horror stories about foreign directors doing something back home, and Hollywood's like, come, we need fresh blood. You come out, and they're like, great, we'll take all the good stuff, and you can fuck off with the rest. And you can have a horrible time. And there's so many great people whose work I really admired who come back from Hollywood saying, I will never, ever work in that system again. So I was kind of ready for that. And I was thinking, well, I'm giving my best shot. Whatever happens, happens. And in this movie, I was fortunate enough that didn't happen. Maybe it was the right budget, definitely the right producers. But every time I got notes, the notes made sense, and I could argue against them. And sometimes when the argument
that's very rare. Make sure you work with those people again.
Yeah,
I definitely intend to. It's strange because I thought, well, if it would have been horrible, I would never bring it up anywhere, and I'd eat up. But that note came from the studio saying, "Can we have more mundanity?" And we had the Corona happen right as we're about to test the movie before we can implement that. So that was done over the internet, which was not the best way to edit. It's 2020, so you can't edit, but it was a little tough. But I'm glad you liked it because my concern was that, it's, I think somebody told me, they asked me a question. Do you know, Ilya, why women put on great makeup and put on great dresses occasionally to look really special. Who are they doing it for? And I was like, well, they're doing it for the men. Like, no, they're doing it to impress other girls. And I was like, really? Shows how much I know. But and this was my editor, William Ye, who did Nobody, who did Hardcore Henry before that. And he told me that. And he said, well, that's the problem, Ilya. You are constantly trying to, put on a dress for other girls, whether you should be making a movie for the audience. Because my concern was, well, people are going to see, my director friends and directors who I admire are going to see that it's all Hutch is wearing the same clothes, and Connie Nielsen's got the same thing, and it's reusing of shots, and it's so cheap, and we're better than that. And I planned out this movie 2000 storyboards. I'm better than this, etc., etc., etc. And getting to start spinning and worrying, and ultimately, no one cares if the story works.
It works great.
No, so I love that you will always keep learning. If you keep your mind open, there's not a single day on the shoot or in the edit where you're not figuring out something you haven't done before. And that's, I think, is one of the greatest things about this profession, is that there is never a moment where you're like, yep, that's the ceiling. No, it's a ceiling as long as you decide that's the ceiling. If you want to get better, you can always get better, no matter who you are.
That's true. And
there
are always mistakes waiting to be made. After you figure it out, not to make that one again. I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
But then, there's that. I forgot about it. I never did that before. That doesn't work. That's a great thing about it.
Constant learning. And mistakes. I think what I really enjoy about directing as well is that there's the constant need to take negative situations and turn them positive. And it's, once you learn to enjoy, to pushing off from the rock bottom and getting back up into the air, that process becomes so sweet, and it's like a drug. It really is. In fact, I don't want to ever be on a film set where everything runs smoothly. I think I'll just be. It'll be great, but at the same time, it's just, where's the, I want that excitement of being so close to failing and then figuring out. It's like a great guitar solo. It kind of, it goes bigger, further away from the original chord, and then you somehow bring it back, and there's this big satisfaction of like, ooh, we're so close to failing, and yet here we are, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah. Sorry, I got a little carried away with that.
It's just the whole, careful what you wish for is all I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's delete that part. Let's take that part.
Nobody would wish for an entire career of sets where things go wrong.
No, but I mean, to a gentle degree. I don't want,
look, it's all problem solving, and if there are no problems to solve, there's nothing to do.
But they don't teach you that at film school, I don't think. Well, I went to a mediocre film school that was not really, it was more of a TV school, and I dropped out, so I don't really know if we ever covered that. But it seems that should be at the forefront of any education or any book dealing with how to direct or how to do a lot of creative things. You have to be able to figure things that are going to be going wrong, and they are going to be going wrong. And it's in a way, I think once you understand that whatever you have, I used to think 100%. If I have something and I'm 100% in love with, and if that's the only way it's going to be, then I have to make sure I get that 100%, and everything else is not right. And that's how I'll make this genius movie sooner or later. And then as soon as I started making films, I realized that that's not how it works. It doesn't need to be 100%, because my 95%, with my high sort of demand to my own creativity, is 100 for somebody else, for the audience definitely. But more importantly, there are different 100% you can hit. It's not just one specific way you can make something. You have to be open. You got to be open to your stars coming up with a great line on the day, or saying, "Hey, can I get some of my best favorite things I've done in my vast filmic career of 2 films were either Bob and Nobody or Charlotte and Harker going, 'Hey, give me another one. I got an idea,' and doing something so wacky that makes everything so much better. And I'm sitting there, why didn't I think of that? But it doesn't matter, because somebody else did, and it's in our film, and it makes everything we do better." Exactly. So you got to keep your mind open. It really is. It really is important. But that comes with experience. I guess you can't go into it thinking that from the very get-go, I guess. Next on the list is another tiny indie movie. Well, this actually is an indie movie, isn't it? Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction, and I think everybody knows everything what there is to know about that film. So I'll talk about exactly why it's very important to me. I lived in England, where maybe you've heard the BBFC, the British Broadcasting Film Certification Board. They are very strict. So there's no such thing as restricted. It's not 17 and with a Guardian. If it's 18 plus, you're not seeing it. You don't care if your granddad's Winston Churchill bring you in. It's not going to happen. So I always tried. I used to. So you can buy a ticket, but the usher will be like, "Where's your ID? I don't have one. Leave." So I would try to watch adult films or 18 plus, and I never could get in. I didn't want to wait. So I heard that Reservoir Dogs is amazing. It had a big buzz in England, in London. It was one of the London and France, and England and France really loved those movies. And there was one theater in England playing Reservoir Dogs for I think 3 years. I couldn't get into that one. I tried. So I went to a bookshop and I bought. There was a published by Faber and Faber. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. They had the script, Reservoir Dogs. So before I saw the movie, which was 2 or 3 years later when it came out in rental, it was very late to England. It was even, I think it was banned for a second, even, if I'm not mistaken. I read that script. I knew it by heart. The first thing I ever read, that's the first script I ever read, was Reservoir Dogs. And I didn't understand anything. I was 11. I was confused by the time jumps. I mean, I loved the swearing and the attitudes and sort of the crimeness of it all and this great dialogue. But when I watched the movie, I was like, I understood. It took the movie to understand the script. Again, maybe because I was just tiny, but same thing happened with Pulp Fiction. I was so excited to see it. Of course, I couldn't. I swear to God, I bought a trench coat to look older. I did that whole, two kids standing on each other's shoulders thing without the other kid, and it didn't work.
Well, you need the other kid. You have to have the other kid,
or a hat, or a fake beard. I don't know, but I didn't have many friends.
Guillermo del Toro used to put on fake beards. Actually,
did he really?
Yeah,
really. Yeah, but he can grow a beard now. I can't grow a beard. I'll die without a beard. That's one of the sad things I've come to accept. But I bought the Pulp Fiction script, and this time when I read it, I understood it. I was a little older, and I loved it. I loved every little bit of it. And I've had that book. It's the only book I've kept over the years. I moved a lot. I went from England back to Russia. I moved 10 apartments and houses throughout that time. My family and myself personally, we don't always keep moving. And when Once Upon a Time in America was coming out, there was a Russian premiere, and somehow it happened that my agent, Mike Simpson, is Tarantino's agent. And I was very lucky that Timur introduced me to him. And when I had this whole, hey, this kid can do music videos, I'm sure he's gonna be a great director. Let's talk to all the agencies, and everybody was just puffing smoke up my. Oh,
sorry, I just want to say you meant Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right?
What I said, Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, Once Upon a Time in America. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they have a few words in common in that title.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Mike and Quentin were in Moscow, and I never wanted to meet Quentin. I have no desire to. One day by mistake, great, but I never asked Mike, even though Quentin's one of my favorite directors. I never be like, hey, Mike, you set me up with a meeting. I want to show him hardcore. I just don't want to. I just don't want to because I love his work too much, and I believe in the whole "don't meet your heroes" thing. It's unnecessary, and I love to admire his work from afar. It's great. It works. Although, anyway, so they arrive in Moscow, and the only thing I asked regarding Quentin to Mike, I said, Mike, I have this script, first edition, 1994, first British edition. I would love a signature. I never collected autographs. I don't care at all. But this is something that it felt like this needs to happen. It's something important. Sure. So I gave it to Mike, and I forgot about it. And then I think it was 6 months later, I'm on the set of the movie that we can't really talk about anymore due to the limitations. And Mike Simpson flies out, and he says to me on playback, and I'm obviously very busy. He's like, no, you do your thing. I'll just hang out here. Mike's really cool. And I come back from shooting one of the scenes, and Mike's, I got something for you. And he gives me this package, and I totally forgot. And I open up this package, and it's that first edition, the thing I had in my possession since 1994, and this was 2019. So my math is so bad, but this must have been 25 years? 25 years later, I have the book, and it's signed by Quentin. It says, to Ilya from Quentin with love, good luck with the film. I swear to God, my eyes are watering up just talking about it. It's the only thing in my possession that if my house burned down, I'd be very sad. The only thing I'd be sad about, and the wife. That's it.
But not in that order.
Oh my God.
Well, I don't know if she'll listen to the podcast, but no, she'll come first. I'll just ask her to grab the book and run.
That's going to carry it.
Yeah, right.
So,
but
I
can so relate. I have the Harlan Ellison was the writer who made me want to write, and it was a teacher in ninth grade who gave me this collection of short stories, and I can literally mark the moment I went, I want to be a writer. And it's true. Like, I think my most prized possession now is that very edition of that book I have now signed from Harlan. And it's like, that and my wife and my cat and my dog. I would save all of it.
It's incredible. I'm not a truly sentimental guy, but just as you're explaining Harlan's book, it's the same thing. It's just this incredible sentimental value.
Yeah,
that's something that really does mean much more than it is, and it's wonderful to have these items. That's the only thing I have, I guess, and it really is important. But apart from that, film was obviously phenomenal. Holds up after all these years, and the music use. I think in Russia, I came back after '95. I think I came back to Russia, and it was only pirate stuff. There was no legal, there was no distribution. Everything was pirated. There'd be these kiosks with a bunch of CDs and all sorts of music, and you buy them for pennies. And the only director who had something was called with just a collection of soundtracks would be 100% Tarantino collection. And it'd be songs from all his movies. And of course from Dusk Till Dawn, because we kind of felt that it was his film, even though it wasn't. But that was it. And I thought, you know what? One day when I grow up and I'll make movies, there will also be a CD with 100% Naishuller collection. Fantastic. And I didn't kind of think ahead that there won't be CDs anymore. But there was a huge inspiration in terms of just great music use. Great music. I think
so someday you'll have your own playlist now.
I'm aiming towards that. Don't know if we'll get it, but
well, I know we're not supposed to talk about his movie, but the music cues really are really good.
Thank you so much.
No, nobody has ever talked this much about their movie when they came on our show.
Is that a pejorative?
I'm sorry.
I'm doing. I apologize to our guest.
So hugely inspirational in that sense as well. Every time I think Hitchcock said you got to make your love scenes like your murder scenes, your murder scenes like your love scenes. And I think music is such a cheat code to that. And there's nothing simpler in a clean way where you have something happening that's grisly and violent, and it's set to sweet things. It's like the reason like the Police song, Every Breath You Take, right? I love the idea that it starts off as this. It's a pop song, except if you listen just even a tiny bit closer than not, you'll hear it's about a stalker, obviously.
It's very
and that
creepy
sort
song,
of darkness.
Yes. Yeah.
Darkness engulfed in warmth is phenomenal, and vice versa. So
it's also amazing though how, again, to digress, how many great pop songs really are about creepy, obsessive people. That song just turns it up just a little tiny bit, but
and people never notice it. People don't care. It's a very
they don't listen to lyrics. People don't listen to lyrics.
And this is what it kills me, because as a listener and a musician, the most important thing for me, I can't listen to music if the lyrics are stupid. I can't accept it. Right. My mind's like, you're not a fool. Why are you enjoying this? At the same time, there's obviously been great songs, what people consider truly great songs, that have very simple and lyrics. It doesn't particularly matter to anybody, but it matters to me. Next up is Papillon, the 1973 version with Dustin Hoffman and Steve McQueen.
Yeah. What? Not the remake?
I honestly, I don't want to watch the remake. I don't want to watch the remake. And my composer on the movie we shouldn't be talking about did the score for that, and I should have listened, but I just don't want to watch it because, it's my favorite book growing up. My dad gave me that book. I was about 11, 12. Hence, Hardcore Henry is called Hardcore Henry because of Henri Charrière, the writer.
Papillon.
Yeah. And I also wanted to give him the sort of the least action name, not Jack or Joe.
Right.
Yes. So Eugene was an option, but I think because Jim Carrey, I remember talking about how his parents named him Eugene because they thought a guy called Eugene never starts a fight. And that stayed in my mind of like, good point. So let's subvert a little bit and go for something softer. But Papillon, I always loved the book. I really enjoyed the film, but the reason yesterday I was thinking of the list. The reason it's on the list is because the first time I understood what truly great acting is when I was watching Papillon, and there's a scene. I think he's on Devil's Island, and he's been locked in solitary for at that point 6 months. There's no food. His friend Degas, played by Dustin Hoffman, in the thickest glasses possible, which I later read on IMDb trivia, that he had to wear contact lenses to work against the glass so he could actually see anything. And they always fought on set, and they had a horrible time apparently. But Degas sends him coconuts. In the shitty soup that they bring to the prisoners, Degas would leave him half a coconut. And that's when I learned that you can live on half a coconut and you can actually survive. So there's a scene when the guards discover the remains of the coconut, and they come to him and they yank him out by his hair through the, I'm not sure the right term for it, the little hole in the metal door.
In the door. Yeah.
And they put the truncheon and they're squeezing, and at this point Steve McQueen looks like complete and utter shit.
Yeah.
When they talk about how Christian Bale sometimes gets old, destroyed for his parts, I always think, well, yeah, but the way Steve McQueen did it, he didn't need to lose all his weight, and he looked just with makeup and the right stubble. They colored his beard correctly. He just looked like complete horrible crap, and he's barely in his last breath. And the warden is saying, "Who sent you these coconuts?" And he's there, he's crushed, and he's like, and there's flies flying around. Maybe they're not, but in my memory they are. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it also sounds like a horrible Godfather impression for some reason, but sorry about that. Can't help myself. I remember watching that and thinking, I am completely not seeing the actor. I am seeing a man at the end of his wits who can't understand what's happening. And obviously Steve McQueen playing a weakened man who's playing completely dead at that point. So it's acting within acting, but a performance within the performance rather. But it's so, I remember watching it and just going like, this is it. This is what people should be calling a great performance. I get it now. I get it, because I just totally forgot that that's Steve McQueen. That's Henri. That's him. And he's dying. And he's still not giving up his friend. So it's all this emotion and this drama, and there's the thrilling element, the thriller element. The stakes are high. So that's, and also because of the scene when he comes into the I forgot the disease, what's it called in English, the what's the disease? There was
the leper colony.
The lepers, thank you.
Yeah.
Leprosy, thank you. And to me, this is the first time I came across the trope of when the leper, he asked the leper for the boat to sail away when he plans his escape, and the leper looks at him. He says, "Here, have a puff of my cigar," and takes out this out of his leper's mouth.
Just juicy.
Gives him a cigar.
He's been chewing on it.
Yes, it's just
yeah,
exactly. It's that's it. It's like kissing a COVID person right now. That's how it would have been. So he takes that, and he never keeps eye contact with the guy, and he takes a puff and gives it right back. And the leper, impressed, says, "How did you know my leprosy is not the infectious kind?" And he says, "I didn't." And I thought, goddamn. So every time I see that trope now, I'm like, yeah, not as cool. Stakes aren't as high. That's it.
That is such a memorable scene. That's it. The other thing, I was just looking at an image. One of the things too is what you said about the performances is so true. It's but the makeup is really good. Mm-hmm. Steve McQueen really looks awful, and I think the secret is I remember, as soon as you said that, I just remember his horrible teeth in that movie.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It's like they sell everything. They really look like they're rotting his head.
Look, I miss films where people had real teeth. I was rewatching Midnight Run and going, yep. I understand we all have refrigerators in our mouths now, but I did not mind seeing De Niro with his coffee and cigarette teeth.
Yeah,
it's aesthetically, obviously the world has changed, etc. But there's something so nice about that.
Yeah.
In a very strange way, but it is. And also, last thing I say, Papillon, is that both the book and the film thematically were about a guy who said, I'm going to be free. I'm not going to die here a prisoner.
Right.
And it carried that throughout every single scene. It's one of the early lessons for me thematically, that if you know the theme of the film, it's actually pretty easy. Well, not easy, but it gets much easier to write, and it definitely gets much, much easier to direct. You know exactly what's necessary, what you can cut, what you don't need to spend your time and money on. And thank you, Papillon. And to my great disappointment in myself, I don't remember the director.
Franklin Schaffner.
I know what I'll be doing tonight. I'll be watching another one of his movies. Thank you.
Try Planet of the Apes. That one's pretty fun.
I didn't know he did that. I've seen it, of course.
Yeah,
I didn't know he did that.
Yep.
It's next on the list is I'll be watching Schaffner movies. That's one thing I'm making note for myself now, which I will try not to forget with my really strange memory. But next on the list is Oldboy.
Oh yeah.
Which absolutely tremendous film. This is my first foray into Korean cinema. I was not keeping tabs on it until that film, and it just opened the floodgates. In fact, the fact that the movie should be talking about is completely inspired by. I told Bob and Derek Kolstad, the writer, I said this is a Korean thriller shot in America by a Russian director, and thank God Derek and Bob both like Korean theater. This is before pre-Parasite, so it was a little tougher sell. So I didn't mention it to the studio. I kept that card closer to my chest. But oh boy, I have a tradition where every night before my birthday, I definitely go to the movies. It's not hard to do because I go to the movies 2 or 3 times a week anyway. That used to all my money used to go to the movies. So, but it's always been. I remember like I was turning 15 and I went to see Assassins with Stallone, and some memories are just so tied to the exact moment I saw them.
Right.
But that day we went to a local theater and we're supposed to see Ladder 49, John Travolta movie. Now I've still yet to see it because when I arrived, it's a Russian theater, right? So it just says Lesnitsa 49. That's the Russian translation. And then Oldboy was in English letters and it said Oldboy. And I was like, I've never seen a film in Russian theaters with its original title on the marquee. That's special. The same thing as, you see the Universal logo and it melts for Waterworld. And you're kind of like, ooh, it's a special film. They changed the logo.
Right.
Always loved that. It just that extra layer of coolness. So I was like, I got to see this. And I remember my buddies, they were like, what's this? And I'm like, oh boy, Korean thriller. I'm like, let's go. It can be worse than Ladder 49. So
that is true.
And it's not.
But it's not.
So we sat down. I had no trailers, nothing. I sit down and I'm blown away. Next 2 hours were, I think, life-changing. To be able to tell a great character-driven story while keeping all the cool action beats, phenomenal. The corridor fight scene, I mean, just truly perfection. And just a very adult tale. I didn't know it was based on a manga. All I know is that Director Park I call him because that's in Korea. Apparently, that's what you call. When I met him, it was Director Park. He's actually the first director I met in LA. They asked, it's like, do you want to meet anybody? It's like, well, who's here? Who can I? They go, how about Park Chan-wook? I'm like, where? So we sat down and had tea. And this was the most surreal. My first trip to LA for business I met Tim Roth and Park Chan-wook. I came back incredibly satisfied. I was like, the whole career doesn't work out. It's okay. I met some of my heroes.
Right.
I'm already satisfied. And it was hilarious because he was asking me about my music video. And I was like, why are you asking me my music video? Who cares? Some guys are falling, it's a POV thing. Who gives a shit? Let's talk about your art. And it was just the warmest memory. But Oldboy, and I rewatch it occasionally. And it's a movie that I showed to Bob because I don't think he's seen that before. But it was just a truly exciting story. I remember reading, we're coming back from Strange Reason back to Sting again, but I remember interview with Sting. He said, after I watched that movie, I made a list of all the people I pissed off. I'm sure the list must have been, 30,000 pages, but it made him rethink, and it made everybody, I think, rethink their, who have they upset in their lives. It definitely made some calls and say, hey, you know what? I was an asshole. I'm sorry. So great theme, amazing action, superb performance.
Yeah.
Everything just clicked. I really think it's a perfect film. It really is. And
cannot disagree. Yeah.
love it. I don't know. I can talk about it much longer, but I don't think I hear the final action sequence of the film we can't talk about playing next door, and I'm supposed to run down and do the Q&A. So I want to try to see if I can.
I was going to say, because I think we're about halfway through. Do you want to just plan on coming back in the next couple of days and finishing up at your leisure rather than racing through?
Can we do that?
We can absolutely do that. Yeah.
Oh, if that. So sorry, I've
been seeing the clock, getting anxious because you're really diving in, man. This is great, but yeah, rather than just have you run off the last 4 or 5, let's reschedule sometime in the next couple of days. That'd be great.
If you guys have the time, I would love that. I just didn't feel like it'd be like, hey, let's do this some other time, some more. Because
I think we're
not working.
We're not going anywhere. Well, Joe, speak for that. Some of us work at the very desk I am sitting at right now, but yeah.
I've been told that during COVID, writers don't write.
Who told you that?
No, I've been reading it in all the newspapers. All these interviews with people. I can't write. I used to be able to write so well, and now I sit at my desk and I just can't write.
That was my first 6 months. I have to admit, but I've been.
What was the reason, Josh? Why couldn't you write? Why didn't you feel like you were good with writing during COVID?
Because the world seemed to be ending, and I guess if I wrote poetry or novels, I could try to finish something and get it out immediately. But the idea of writing a screenplay in which, at best, a couple of years from now, the movie comes out, and it sort of feels every morning like a couple of years is never going to happen. It's like the world is ending around us.
Very pessimistic view, which I hope you don't still hold.
No, I do not. But it was. But I think that was sort of on a subconscious level. I think it's just like it's all. You're watching movie theaters close down, and you're watching businesses shut down, and you're like, is there even going to be?
And there was an election.
And, but is there even going to be a film industry in a couple of years? And I also think it was such a, I don't want to say it's unique in the past 100 years. We've never been through this before. So it was just a real whammy. I know a lot of people are, people are struggling with depression and with all kinds of horrible stuff as a result of this. And that was there. It just sort of, there was a certain kind of steady thrum of what's the point. And because I remember sitting there thinking, I would sit there, for instance, before doing an episode of the show, and I'd work in the morning, and I'd get a few pages done, and be like, why am I even doing this? And then you do the podcast, and it's like, well, this is great because this will be out in a week, and I'm sure we'll all still be here in a week. So, I had this kind of pinball back and forth. But yeah, every writer I know, with one exception, who's been on our show, Dan Waters, my friend who wrote Heathers, claims that he's having amazing writing days. He's working on a book, and but everyone else I know is just like, I don't know what the point is, And I think because it's a solitary profession as well, one of the things I always envied about directors is no matter how bad things are, you guys walk on a set and there's at least 30 people there who are going to keep things going. So if you just sit
some are there to even support you. Yeah,
exactly. So like I have worked on films, not that this is optimum, where like the director just comes, sits down in a chair and goes like this and doesn't move. And they just go ahead and make a film around them. That at least can happen. If I sit in my chair and don't do anything, words do not appear.
Nothing happens.
Page. Yeah. So I don't know, but yeah.
I love writing.
Yeah.
I hate the process, unfortunately, which doesn't make any sense, but I guess it does.
Of course it does, yeah.
Right when the reason I asked is right after quarantine started, I went back from production shut down, post shut down. So I went back home and I was like, you know what? Now I have that dark superhero thing I've been thinking about 5 years. Now's the time. And I couldn't for the exact same reason. I was thinking, what is the world going to be wanting to see? And it took me about a month of just sitting there playing video games as the world was ending. I mean, I'm thankful that I had a roof over my head and a bit of money that I can, buy food and not worry about it too much. It took me a month before it clicked for me. It says that I thought, look, it's either going to go super wild and it's going to be Mad Max and I won't do a good job. I'll give up pretty quickly. Or the world is going to be wanting to see cool things and happy things. Right. And that's what you're going to be doing. You're going to be making things that are going to make people, there's applause.
Oh, that's your cue.
Oh, man.
It's a movie theater, Joe. There's a movie theater.
We'll dub it in, and it'll sound like there's applause right there.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say is there's still the credit sequence title, mid credit thing coming up.
Oh yeah.
I wrote to Josh that I'm very happy that he saw the film and he enjoyed it, because we were obviously inspired by A History of Violence, and Derek and I talked about it. But Joe, we were working those 7 days a week with our DP, and we were watching a lot of films exactly for it, sort of as references and just inspiration. At a certain point, I remember Paul saying, "That's it. Let's not watch anything. Let's just watch something good, something happy." And we watched The Burbs. We watched The Burbs. And I remember that evening, but in the best of ways, obviously. And I remember the next day we came to work less tired than we've been for the last week or two. So thank you for that.
Oh, that's great. That makes me feel good.
Yeah. And
I hope we contributed in some way to your good movie that we're not supposed to talk about.
That's right.
I think you have. Thank you very much, guys. I got to run. They're knocking at the door.
Hello, sir. After a rousing Q&A, I'm just going to ask because I know the answer. Like, you should never ask. We're like lawyers here. Don't ask a question if you don't know the answer. How did your screening go, Ilya?
It went really well. It went really well. It went really
Fantastic.
well. The audience capacity is at 50 now in Russia. That 50 was packed, and I was happy to say everybody stayed for Q&A, which is always a nice sign. And we had a great chat. It was just a proper, sincere, and open discussion of things. And I like talking about what we aimed for, what we didn't get. I kind of think it's so much fun to. I used to spend so much time on the IMDb trivia boards, just reading about all those movies that I loved and all the mess ups and all the plans. Oh, we didn't have money for this, we didn't have time for that, but we tried. And you're like, wow, that could have been great. But if you don't know these things, the movies are still great. But once you start learning that people wanted more and they still made it work, it becomes. I think it's very important for a director to. I think we talked about. I hate to repeat myself from the last conversation. My memory is so bad, but I think I did mention that it's important to understand that whatever you're going for, if you don't get to land exactly that doesn't mean what you did is worse than that.
Right.
So, Q&As and the trivia boards and all that stuff. It's. I think it's very inspiring, and that's the ultimate goal. I remember going to. I went to a few master classes where American screenwriters would fly out to Moscow, and there'd be film schools that you can just go in for a day and listen to people. And I don't recall really learning much, but I do recall feeling very inspired to go back and start writing or trying to do something. And I think that's the most important thing a professional can give to someone who wants to get into it. Is just have the energy. Like, you can do it, because really you can. It doesn't mean you won't be able to be good, but you can definitely become a director or become a writer. You'll take a long time to get good at it, but I think I can't remember who said it. Maybe it was Robert Rodriguez, but I think he said you're a director as soon as you put together your first thing, whatever it is. You cut 2 VHS tapes together, and that's editing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
It's just not very professional, and no one's going to see it, but you're learning.
It's a start. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a big fan of kind of opening the process up to people, because it's when I was a kid, you didn't have that much access to people who did this. They were and there's an upside to this too. I'm sure Joe agrees. Like, the people who made movies were not, they weren't me or my neighbors. They were gods living on Olympus who did this thing I could not understand. And it's been sort of one of the great joys of getting to do this is opening that process up for people and letting them see that it's work, it's a job, and if you apply yourself, you can do it.
There's nothing unreachable. It gets much tougher. It's like, you can climb a mountain, but it'll take a lot of time before you're ready to go and take on Everest. Right. Then maybe you'll be one of the frozen bodies up there.
That's right. But you can do it. It just might kill you, which is, just like the film business.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back into it. You were walking us through.
What's your next one?
Yeah, what's next on your
last one was Oldboy, and this next one is, I think it's the odd one out of the list. It's a film called Punishment Park by a British director called Peter Watkins.
Yeah, Peter Watkins.
Yeah, Peter Watkins, yes.
I did not see this a long time ago. This is the freshest film. I think it's the freshest film that I've seen on this list, surprisingly. Well, let me just look at the other ones. It is the freshest one. I only saw it maybe 5 years ago or so, but it affected me tremendously. People ask me, like, what are your sort of movies that in the last couple of years that have really affected you? I go Punishment Park, and they look it up. And they're like, but that's 1971. I'm like, yeah, but it's new for me.
There are no old movies. They're just movies you haven't seen.
That's right.
Exactly. But Punishment Park, it's a very, I think it's a very special film. It's a very rare film that has a lot to say. It's got it doesn't have a cast in terms of, I don't think many actors there are professionals. I remember reading up a little bit about it, and I think the story of how Peter Watkins came to make the film was he made The War Game, which was a
which is great.
But it was too great. BBC were like, it
was too realistic. I mean, it was just too upsetting for people. They said, we can't run this,
Well, it's about nuclear.
Yeah. It's about what happens after the bomb goes off in Britain. And it's very realistic.
It's a
time frame.
faux documentary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And grueling. Yeah.
Can you call it a mockumentary if it deals with a heavy subject matter?
I don't think it's a mockumentary always implies that you're doing something satirical, but this is really a pseudo documentary, I guess you could call it.
Okay. Well, that is good to know, because I was always referring to that film it was kind of mockumentary, and I would be like, feels a little off. And now I understand the difference. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, it's not a barrel of laughs.
No, it's pretty grim, but it's very compelling.
Yeah. Why is it the opposite? Yeah.
And it's only 45
minutes. To America, because quality trumps quantity. And it's nice that, I like films that, there are the 3-hour movies that I like. I think The Wolf of Wall Street is my favorite example of a film that flies past. It's a 3-hour long movie that I've seen 5 or 6 times because it feels like it's an hour and a half I remember reading Scorsese saying, when he was reading the Goodfellas book, he said, I know I'll make this into a movie, but I'll make it feel like one long trailer. And that is the trick. That's why all his sort of long epics are, apart from the deathly serious ones, they're all incredibly entertaining.
Yeah,
at their severe length, which it shouldn't really work that way, but he makes it work. But Peter Watkins, and I could be completely wrong, but this is what I read back then when I saw the movie, is that he didn't see a future for himself in England, so he went out to America, and to make something interesting and successful, he decided to take on the whole liberal versus Republican situation and made another movie that I think it played for a weekend in New York, and people were like, no, He kind of, he had 2 shots in the shotgun, and he emptied 1 round at his right foot, and then he's like, you know what? I like that. And blew his other foot off. And it's the only movie on the list I don't think everybody has seen, and I really think everybody should seek it out. It's not the easiest thing to find, but I saw it. A friend of mine who used to run the Midnight Magnus program at TIFF on Instagram posts movies that he recommends occasionally, and sometimes he gets things that are super interesting. He has links where, anyway, I digress. Point being, seek out that movie. And the reason I really liked it, and the reason it stuck with me so well, is that it deals with something very important at the time. The Vietnam War, the things that are happening in America. And it does it in a horrifyingly realistic and incredibly scary way, where there's just, instead of a proper court hearing, it's a tent in the middle of a Californian desert. Maybe it's Nevada. I think it's California. And it's not a jury of your peers. It's 12 people who hate everything you stand for. If you're a poet, then you're an asshole and you deserve to die. And it's what is the term for those cases? Pony court. Is that what you call it in American?
Kangaroo court.
Kangaroo court. Thank you. Pony. Kangaroo court. All the verdicts are predetermined. As soon as if you're in that room, you're going to be fucked. And if you're found guilty, you have to cross the Californian desert and make, I can't remember the miles, but it's a very unrealistic number of miles. You got to reach an American flag that's in a mountain, or a hill or a mountain, quite a long ways away. And people just go. And the way he shoots it, it's completely documentary, and it's film. And we just go, of course it's film, it's 1971. I like how now it's like when something shot on film, it becomes a little bit more special.
Right.
And in a way, it's a little bit of a cheat code. But film is film. I mean, film is film, and I love the grading now. You can make great stuff. You can put the grain on post, and that it can look absolutely beautiful. But still, film is film. I think nothing beats that that real physical. Physical is the term. Physical concoction of chemicals that actually fixes in eternity what you have done in front of the camera. But he talks about, I like how she shares screen time between the sheriffs that are, kind of almost good old boys in a way, and they're there to do their job, yet they hate the people they're hunting. Pretty much you have to cross the desert and the sheriffs are after you, and if they catch up, then you're done for it. That doesn't mean they have the right to kill you, but because somebody, takes a bit of violence towards one of the deputies, the sheriff gets bloodlust, and the guy is just the prickiest of pricks, just absolutely horrible. But he thinks he's doing the right thing, which, as we all know, villains need to be doing the right thing.
Oh, yeah.
And as the film goes on, it's not going to end well for anybody. Much in the same way as I was watching Uncut Gems and going, "This is great. I'll never watch it again. I've never had more anxiety." But
yes,
I think it's a superbly masterful film, that one, and I'm very jealous of the Safdie brothers' skills in that respect. But there's the characters. There's no way these characters will ever have a happy ending. It just can't work. Even though in Uncut Gems they kind of do give him the happy ending, so he goes out on a high note for himself. Spoiler, but the movie's been around, so I think it's okay. It's a year and a half now, but it's the same thing here when it's just so painful. And this feeling of, I remember there was a hostage crisis when I was in high school in Moscow when they took a theater hostage, and the authorities used gas that ultimately ended up killing about, I think 500 civilians died, maybe 400, but it's a horrific number right in the center of the city. And I remember interviews with the parents and the relatives of those inside the theater. And I remember them talking, and it's one of the most strongest experiences emotionally I had in my life when they're talking about this feeling of helplessness. And there's just nothing, that's it. You're just there. You're pretty much, your loved ones are across the courtyard in that place. And there's nothing you can possibly do. Absolutely nothing. And you're just waiting and time stands still. And you just, again, the ultimate feeling of helplessness. And I think this film really captures that. And throughout all this helplessness, you have all these people who are talking about ideals, we're talking about morals, we're talking about the American way, and none of that ultimately matters. And the further it goes, and the way the film is set up is you have the first, I think the first 10 or a dozen guilty, and I put that in the bunny ears because it's not really, they're not guilty at all. They're just guilty through the kangaroo court. As they're crossing the desert, and simultaneously it's intercut with the next batch as they're arguing for their freedom and they're saying, look, we're doing the right thing. We're allowed to have this opinion that's in the Constitution. And those assholes just sitting there smirking and just shitting all over everything America is to stand for. Now, this film affected me when I saw it in maybe 2010, 2013, 2014. I can't imagine what Americans seeing this in New York in 1971 must have felt. It should have been absolutely horrifying. It must have been disgusting. And it's a shame that movie never got a chance because if streamers were around back then, I think it would be a hugely watched and hugely influential film. And I keep seeing references to it in music videos. And I think there's a great music video by, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, Roman Gavras, for Mia, the British singer. And it's a 9-minute music video, which, by the way, I do suggest you check it out. It's called Born Free. It takes the whole concept of grabbing people and putting them through this test, except what they do in that video is they, instead of liberals or African Americans or Asian Americans or white people, who they go for are gingers. And they're just crashing through a lane, just grab, and it's done the same pseudo-documentary style, super rough, as they're barging down the door. The SWAT team's just grabbing a bunch of gingers, throwing them on the bus. And that's such a great explanation of what racism and fascism really are. It's just taking a group of people, because you're looking like, why are they grabbing gingers? Well, why would they be grabbing Jews? It doesn't make any sense, except if you're a fascist asshole. So I love how the film did have an effect, and not just on one or two people. I know there's more people that have been affected by it, and I wish more folks would have seen it, and especially back then, because then Peter Watkins could have had the ability to do more important things. Yeah, that's.
He did another picture once called Culloden, which was about the Battle of Culloden in Scotland, and I happened to see it on a double bill with Bonnie Prince Charlie, which was the official David Niven starring movie about that, and it was night and day, and it was really, really an interesting contrast. I don't know where you would go to find. I think Peter Watkins' stuff is out on Criterion.
There's I think it's Arrow in England. I've got a double Blu-ray of Culloden and the War Game, and then there's one standalone of Punishment Park.
Yeah, he wasn't especially prolific, but very influential.
I like hearing that he was influential because he most definitely deserved it. And
as you say, nobody saw it at the time, or very few people did, but people still talk about it. It definitely had an impact. I mean, here we are in 2021. Talking to a young Russian filmmaker who's,
that is pretty weird. So in a way it is, I mean, that is the measure of success.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you cross the pond and then go deeper towards the east, and there's the Soviet-born dude, and he's watching Punishment Park. So yes, Peter Watkins definitely did something right.
Well, there's that great line about the Velvet Underground's first album. I can't remember if Lou Reed said this or somebody else. I think Brian Eno said this about them, that it only sold a handful of copies, but everybody who bought it went on to start a band that mattered. So
absolutely. Like, Velvet. There's no. But here's the thing: Velvet Underground now.
Right.
Everybody knows Lou Reed. Everybody. I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people know Velvet.
Yes.
So we grew out of that thing. With Punishment Park, it's still fairly niche, and it's just a little annoying. It's a little annoying, and
well, we've done our part today to.
That's right.
To raise its profile.
I certainly hope so. If people come out with one thing out of this and watch Punishment Park, I think this was all not just fun for me, but worthwhile for the greatest good of the world. So moving on from Punishment Park, next one is Dr. Strangelove, and
I don't know that one.
It's a super indie, very, very underground film. It's hard to pick one Kubrick movie. Is it Kubrick or Kubrick? What's the American pronunciation?
It's Kubrick, but some people say Kubrick, and it doesn't. You can say whatever you want. He doesn't care.
Yeah, he won't complain.
It's hard to pick one Kubrick movie, but it's. Again, I'll go for the replayability factor. I've seen Dr. Strangelove, I'd say 10 or a dozen times. It's one of those that it's an endlessly. It just brings me joy.
Yeah.
The entire thing. Again, it's the little man trying to do something right. The big men smoking cigars, talking about H2Os and the Soviets draining the U.S. out of fluids. That alone is, we're not going to be like. It's technically very simple, especially by Stanley's terms. There's nothing complicated about it at all. But what's complicated about it is that he tells. If the story is, again, I'm going off half of IMDb, half of things I read in magazines over the years. But I think he had the rights to. Book was
Red Alert. It was a book.
Red Alert, yeah.
A book by Peter George, and it was a straight book. And he started to develop it as a straight movie. And he started to realize that the stuff that happened in the story was so absurd that he said the only way to make this is a nightmare comedy, because it's just too ridiculous to make a straight movie out of. And which wasn't strictly true, because then Failsafe came along and they made a very good straight movie out of it.
But isn't the story that wasn't it one studio releasing both? And
Columbia bought Failsafe because they were making Strangelove, and that was an independent film, and they said, let's buy it and keep it off the market so that we can get our picture out first.
And then they released it, I think, within a year.
Yeah, within the next year. But the bloom was off the rose. I mean, Strangelove was widely misinterpreted when it was first released because it was right after the Kennedy assassination. There's even a line where Slip Pickens talks about going to Dallas, and they had to redub it with Las Vegas. Because it was too raw. And we had just come off the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the day I saw the picture at the Beekman Theater in New York City when it opened, nobody laughed. The atmosphere was so tense, and they took it so seriously, even though it was absurd, that it took another viewing of mine to realize how funny it was, because I was caught up in the general air of tension that surrounded the movie.
Isn't it so interesting how the right crowd or the wrong crowd affects your perception?
Sure.
I mean, that's why movies work well at festivals, and then their ratings drop when the public and critics who weren't there see it by themselves.
Yeah.
It's the very interesting. Very interesting.
And there are so many. I keep thinking about what Joe said, that and if I have a regret about seeing your film, it is that it turns out I could actually have waited and seen it for the first time in a theater in LA. They've reopened. Nobody will be, or at the time of dropping, will actually be showing in some theaters in America. And it's such a completely different experience.
You could always see it again.
I could, but it won't be the same. That's true. But I still I keep thinking about what you said. It just haunts me. And I keep, friends who are, you've seen it. How is it? I'm like, if you're up for it, go see it in the theater. It's
Thank you.
Yeah, by all means. But sorry to take you away from what you were saying, but that's it's true. It's a different experience.
What Joe said about the experience as well. I'm kind of I've been very lucky how I remember seeing some good films, and the aura with the audience around. I remember watching Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which was a movie that was tailor-made for me. It's my favorite genre. I'm gonna love it. It's long. It's Thomas Alfredson. I loved Let the Right One In. I thought it's one of the best directed movies I've seen at that point in my life. And I was so waiting for that. And I went to a good theater. In fact, it was so good that they had the sort of the two good seats. The seats that are kind of like you go all the way back, and there's just you might as well have a massage therapist there. It's a little too good. I want my theaters to be like not janky, but not first class Virgin Atlantic crossing the ocean kind of thing. And there was a couple sitting behind us. There was an older guy with a younger girlfriend. And the thing I remember most about the film is I think at about the 2-hour mark, she was bored from like minute 5. That's okay. And she turns to what is obviously her sugar daddy. Nothing against that, but it is what it is. And she asked, I gotta remember his name even. I remember her voice. It's just strange. But she says, make sure I translate this correctly. She says, Vlad, how much longer do you think it's gonna be? I'm doing the Valley Girl crap accent because that's the translation. And he turns to her and says, in a very calm and sophisticated way, he says, honey, I think the costume designers have a few more costumes they gotta show off. And I enjoyed the film, but that is what struck with me after all these years, unfortunately. So yeah, good crowds. That's why I like going to the movies if I know a movie's going to be at least interesting or at least not bad. I haven't done it in a while thanks to the great pandemic, but I used to just call up a bunch of people, call up 10 people, make a little group chat and be like, guys, we're going to the movies. I bought tickets. You just pay me back later. Let's all go. And we'd bring out of 10, 5 or 6 would show up. And we'd have a great time. And then if you get to go afterwards, sit preferably in a diner, get like an apple pie with some ice cream, and you get to talk about a movie. And there's a good show that a movie works is that you want to talk about it right afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think every great movie deserves that conversation, but some movies their effect is amplified by having the ability not just to read critics online or read forums or go on Reddit, but to have a real life conversation with your friends who are very likely to have different tastes than you. And see from their perspective. Anyway, I forgot what movie we were talking about. Yeah, we're talking about
Strangelove.
Strangelove. So Strangelove, the first time I saw it, I did not know that Peter Sellers played like 15,000 roles in that movie. I did not know. So when I checked the credits, I was like, oh, My God. I was young and silly and naive, I guess. I was maybe 20. So no, I'm kidding. I was a little younger, but it was, I was surprised. I was really surprised by how amazing a job he did with all these parts. And considering, the great cast around him with great, I want to say with George Patton. No, that's not his name.
George C. Scott.
George C. Scott, who I'm a big fan of. In fact, my first film, I borrowed the name Hardcore for my movie, thinking, hey, you can do that because we're making an independent Russian movie. We can call it Hardcore because the worst case scenario, if someone starts looking for our movie because it's newer and they look up George C. Scott's movie, well, isn't that a win for everybody because they get to see a good film and not our fun slapsticky thing. And then when we sold the movie to the American studio, they said, well, Sony doesn't want to give you they don't want to give us the rights to the name. They occasionally sell it to cable shows and it's a lot of lawyer stuff and they don't want to give it to us. So you have to add Henry to the title. And I remember I didn't make much money from the movie as you're not supposed to in the first film. But I remember thinking, all right, so this is all I got. And I was speaking to Sony about a different movie potentially at that point. And I said, guys, I have all this money I made on this one. Can I buy the title from you? And they were like, it's so much hassle. We're Sony. We have things to do. I'm like, but it's important. They're like, yeah, but not to us. And I was like, okay, fair enough. Anyway,
can I at the risk of enraging our guest, I think Hardcore Henry is a better title for that film.
I agree.
You know what? It's
more whimsical.
I just can't accept that I didn't come up with it. That's why. It was a fun situation where it was studio was STX, which I think did a great job in terms of and once they bought the movie for money that we didn't dream of as we were making it. They said, is there anything you want to do in the film? I was like, yeah, we'd like to buy the festival soundtrack that we usually want to get the rights to Queen and all that stuff, which cost them a lot of money. And I said, look, there's a few CG things that we just couldn't afford. And they gave me money, went to a Russian CG company who redid the entire fifth reel, which looked pretty bad in the festival. There's a big cyborg fight in the rooftop, and the city outside, it looked like crap in the festival. And I really wanted to have Moscow and just make it, not 3D, but make it look, prettier. Yeah. And went through, I sat down, I think it was the time, it was the president of production, Kathy. We sat down and she spent, this really surprised me because I always heard that, Americans, they take their time off seriously. You're not going to call them on the weekend. They're not going to work past 6 or 7. And she sat down with me at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. And we went through the entire film and then picked it up on Thursday again, going through every single effect that I wanted. And I wanted obviously everything. And she explained why you can't have this. And not that you can't have it. She's like, there's no need to spend $2,000 on this shot because no one but you is going to know. And it was such a great learning experience. And they actually did what a lot of what I think they gave me 2/3 of what I wanted, which is ridiculous. They could have done nothing and I still wouldn't have been happy, but they gave me so much. But they came up with once they said that Sony's not going to work, and I talked to Sony, it didn't work. They made a list, and the list was the most ridiculous things, like the most classic Hollywood things. It was like Hardcore, The Awakening. And I was like, I'm going to chew off my fingers before I ever have the semicolon or colon, The Awakening. I can't. And at the bottom of the list was there, like, maybe this one. And I looked at it and I was like, Hardcore Henry. I'm like, it's like Max. It works. It does work. And it is for, plus a lot of the territories, they kept hardcore. Only North America had to become that. My favorite one is Portugal, where they called it hardcore, Misión Extrema, which to me was very much in the genre.
It's pretty good.
But there were look, it's whatever works. And the point is, the movie comes out, and I should just be thankful that it did come out theatrically, which we never hoped that we make a film that will come out worldwide. This is the first Russian movie to do so, and on a very, very flimsy budget. Just a bunch of kids thank God we had the only professionals we really had on set were the stunt guys. Thank God, because
you would have to.
Yeah.
So let me just offer you for, and you can just have it for free. Nobody 2, The Nobodying.
I love it. Hold on, let me call my people. I don't have any people, but yeah. I wonder. No, I'm curious. The most expected title would be Nobody's.
Oh, Nobody. Sure. Yeah, go the Cameron route.
We'll see. It's always
Nobody's.
Nobody's
Because there's always Mr. Nobody and Ms. Nobody.
Mr. Yes.
I think there was a movie, European film, Mr. Nobody, with Jared Leto, which was pretty good science fiction. So, but I don't think anybody in North America cares about anything European. At least I'm talking about studio wise. They'll just take it in within reason.
By the way, that does bring up a point. We're talking about your work again, which is terrible, but you realize you need to make another movie quickly, because until you do, you are nobody director.
Yeah, that's why Josh, that's why I was perfect for the movie, because I am a nobody. Who's going to direct this thing? Well, he's done a little film over there, so yeah, it made perfect sense. But gently going back to Dr. Strangelove, I really think it's another perfect film. Very few of them, but it is like very few films you watch as a director and be like, there's nothing I want to change. Like nothing, everything. There's just, everything is just exactly there. The ending is absolutely genius. The characters are genius. The dialogue, the whole, you're going to have to answer to the Coca-Cola company. There's just so much. And I haven't seen it in a long time, but there's so much of it is in my mind. And I don't think it past the idea of, again, coming back to my amazingly huge filmography of hardcore, when I started writing the script, it's supposed to be a 90-minute music video. There was no plan. And April 1st, we shook hands that this movie is going to start shooting July the 1st. So there's no time to write a script and prep. We had to do everything simultaneously. And on page 1 of the script, I'm like, okay, we're going to need to make this a proper thing. But we need to have some dialogue. We need to have some story. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to even finish watching it, let alone the poor audience. And I came across the idea that when you're going to have a character, and maybe it'd be great to get a foreign actor, which sounds I said some weird bullshit. I came across an idea that you might need to have a character. That's a good one. Okay, that's very original. But yeah, I spoke to Timur, the producer, and I said, let's try to get somebody that the West knows and someone who the West loves. And he said, well, who are you thinking of? I said, you know what? I'm a huge fan of District 9. I think the guy's got the right energy. And you can tell that he's got the attitude of, let's try and make something weird and see if it happens. And he's like, oh, Charlton, I know Charlton. He flew out to Kazakhstan once for a festival that then got canceled. But he did it. He never complained. He heard about it. Just talk to him. So I talked to Charlton. I said, Charlton, we're doing a POV movie. It's going to be weird. I have no idea if it's going to be good. Here's the music video. He's like, I saw the music video a dozen times. I love it. What do you want? I said, I would love for you to consider being the lead in the script that we don't have, and a movie starts shooting in 3 months, and the budget is. And he said, well, if a part is interesting, then I'll take it. And I was like, great. I was so excited. I was like, shit, now I have to really come up with something interesting. Fuck, I really need it for the film. So as I was sitting and going through potentially characters that he won't be able to say no to, it crossed my mind exclusively thanks to Dr. Strangelove and Peter Sellers and Kubrick, that we're going to give him 10 parts. Because no actor who's interested in the art of acting is going to, pass on something that, you don't get that many opportunities, if ever. So I called him back a couple of days later. I said, Charlton, I don't know what they're going to be, but there's going to be 10 characters. And they're all going to be, it's going to be one guy controlling them all who plays pretty much dress-up dolls, except they're avatars, and they're going to have different, because the guy's going to be a little psychotic. I think we're going to make him gay, because I love an action movie where the lead character is gay. It's just be hilarious, and no one's going to expect it. And especially in Russia, where we're known to be fairly homophobic in our laws. So it'd be a nice little fuck you to the slight wrongs in this world. We're not even slight wrongs. And so if it wasn't, I don't think, so you could say that without Dr. Strangelove, there'd be no Charlton in hardcore, and then hardcore wouldn't really be happening. And then you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking about movies that I like.
That makes it a key work for you.
Yeah, for sure.
I think so. And it's also a great movie. I mean, it is. Ticks all the boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, as we're talking about these films, I know that I'm going to rewatch Strangelove today, and I haven't seen it in about half a decade, and I'm going to enjoy it as much as I did the first time, I'm sure.
Yeah. And you will. I predict you will.
May I ask, what is your, if you have a favorite Kubrick movie, what would be yours?
It's so hard to choose.
Yeah,
because they're all actually they all have him in common, but they're also different. Mm-hmm. What he's trying to do, I'm pretty taken with The Killing, frankly, which is again, you talk about perfect movies in terms of casting. Certainly, it's perfect, and the whole idea of telling the story several times with the narrator and everything is and again, it is another movie that didn't even make a ripple when it came out. and Paths of Glory, another picture that's, one of the great anti-military movies. Also was not a big success, and I think it was banned in France for like 20 years.
Paths of Glory was banned in France?
Yeah.
Well, that means you did something right.
Yeah.
You did in Europe. You're pushing the right buttons.
I honestly, I think we talked about this on a recent episode, and I can't remember what I said because I realized that pretty much, maybe with the exception of Clockwork Orange, which I think is a great film, but it's hard to love. And Eyes Wide Shut, which just never clicked with me. Yep. Pretty much my favorite Kubrick film is whichever one I watched last. I came very late to Barry Lyndon. There was something
but
about
you
it.
came.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah, I remember seeing that and I would not shut up about Barry Lyndon for weeks. But I have a very soft spot in my heart for Strangelove. It's ridiculous, and it's ridiculously entertaining. Always.
I think with Kubrick, he could play in any. I think my favorite horror movie was The Shining. No matter how much Stephen King didn't like it, I saw his version, so his opinion is a little void. But it speaks so much to the level of his incredible craft, how he could really jump into any genre and make the best movies in that genre. Yeah. There are very few directors who could do that.
It's true. They have an almost hypnotic hold on you when you start to watch. I mean, it's hard to tear yourself away if you just click the channel and it's like, oh, and The Shining is like watching a bad dream happen. Mm-hmm. And no matter how many times you've seen it, and the pace is very measured, and I've always been curious about the ending, the lopped off piece of ending, where he back in the hospital bed with the ball. I always thought that sounded interesting, but he had this tendency to sort of he'd release the movies, but then they wouldn't be done, so you'd have to go back and fiddle with them. I mean, he took 20 minutes out of 2001 between the opening and 2 days later. And that was because it got terrible reviews, and they were afraid they're going to lose their shirts. And so he did this frantic recut, which is the one that exists. But a friend of mine went on opening night, and I went like a day later, and the print was full of splices because they had actually gone up to the booth and physically cut all of the pieces out of the picture.
Oh my!
Which meant there were bumps in the soundtrack. God. This is 70 millimeter. I mean, it's not a one-man job. Scissors. Yeah, he's sure doing a lot of tape. I didn't know but that's what we have. I mean, that's what has existed these many years. That is still fascinating.
And now I want to see 2001 again.
No, just do a fest. You can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Even the first two are interesting. Killer's Kiss and Fear and Desire, which is the movie he disowned, but when you watch it, especially as a former film student, I mean, it is a film student's movie. It's a bunch of guys out in the field, and it's the war, and it's a pretty interesting movie. I mean, it's a charcoal sketch of what he was going to do later, but he was much too hard on it because he was such a perfectionist.
I think that's a price you have to pay if you are going to have that approach. You're not going to be happy most of the time.
Yeah.
And it can be psychologically easy. But on the other hand, you get to make classics. So it balances out.
It balances out. Yeah. You get a career,
And be miserable. So,
I feel like we should just talk about Kubrick for the rest of the podcast.
No, move on. Let's move on.
And the next, so this is great because we're jumping from, I love it. We're going from Kubrick Strangelove. We're going to Anchorman. That's right. We're going to Anchorman.
That's a perfect movie.
We're going to Anchorman because I think it's the single most rewatched film of mine. And when I was making this list, I was you can't go on this podcast and talk about Anchorman. You know what? I can, because when I was,
of course you can. Yes,
it's as I think I wrote this, Josh, to you when the first email I said, I'm going to drop all sense of pretentiousness and go for things that just make me smile and make me happy. So that's what I'm doing. And I do think Adam McKay is a terrific director, and his political viewpoints have always been there, and the way he cares about things, it's far beyond what you expect from someone who does lighthearted comedy movies before he switched, to The Amazing Big Short and to Vice. But again, as I was making a list, I realized how much I love ensemble movies. Most of these have a great amount of amazing actors playing off each other, which I'm not a huge fan of theater, but the more I think about it, the more I really should be, because that's what theater really is. It's a bunch of people on stage playing off against each other. Hopefully there's some good story in there thrown in, but dialogues and just colorful characters. And what better example in comedy world than Anchorman? I don't know if there is. I remember seeing, because I never grew up with SNL. So when I was watching all the best stuff videos in the mid 90s, late 90s, I was just kind of not feeling the comedy. I like British style a little bit more. And it took a while. It was an acquired taste for me. And I thought that Will Ferrell kind of does the same thing in every film, and it's very predictable. But it's not that predictable. And I felt I was very wrong in my original judgment. And Anchorman, I think, is the shining example of what his brand of comedy delivers on so well. It's ridiculous. You should not like the character. I think but there've been examples of people who I really admire making the wrong characters who you can't like enough to enjoy the situations they find themselves in. But Ron Burgundy playing Will Ferrell, I think it's one of the finest comedic creations, definitely in the last 20, 30 years. And I don't know enough old Hollywood movies to really say of all time, and it's probably a big one because we have all the classics. But with Will Ferrell, it's the film I quote most of the time. And again, I quote it in shitty translations to Russian to people who don't care for it. So I just do it because I love it. And people look at me weird, and I don't give a shit, because to me, they're hilarious. I don't think I've ever, I don't drink alcohol much, but when I do, I've never not said, Scotch, 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 down my tummy, goes from the beginning. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think every scene has a terrific line. And I remember working with Steve Merkovich, who was the editor on, Hardcore, one of them. And then he cut the other guys with Adam McKay. And he was telling me that the best lunchtimes of all time on set were on Adam McKay movies, where Adam and Will would just eat and at the same time improvise for an hour. And you very hard to take a bite of your food because you'd be laughing nonstop. And you expect it from Will Ferrell, but you kind of don't expect Adam to be the same. And he most definitely is incredibly gifted in not just directing. Then I remember reading the backstory how he came from Second City, I think in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. And so the background is not a film student, but a comedy student, which makes perfect sense once you think about it. And once I started learning how they make these films, where a lot of the comedy comes from, here's the camera, roll it, go. And they do a take with the comedy, and then they improvise for the rest of the how many feet of tape you have. And you can tell that, I think they made, if I'm not mistaken, there's another, so there's Anchorman, and then there's also Anchorman 1.5,
right,
which is another 45 or 50, I can't remember how long it is, but with all the outtakes and parallel subplots, and it's not as good, but and you understand why they cut all of that, but it is a hilarious standalone
still
film.
Pretty goddamn funny, yeah.
Exactly. So the approach is very different. I've never, I dream of making a comedy movie, a straight up comedy. I'm not sure if I ever will, because I can't imagine a situation where someone sends me a film where people aren't punching each other, at least for a little while. Look, and I appreciate people sending me scripts in the first place, but I would love to take a shot, because I do think, thanks to watching all these movies for all these years, and I do have some understanding of what makes things fun and funny. And I do think it's much harder to make a comedy film than it is to do a lot of the other genres, because action is just dudes fighting. It's not that difficult. You have character, motivation. You get in there with a camera and you have stuntmen and you figure it out and you go. To me, it's a very basic puzzle. Fun to solve, but very basic. With horror, I understand that, if you go the cheap way of jump scares, it's not difficult at all. It's only the intelligent comedic stuff that's I feel would be very hard to pull off. But a straight up comedy is kind of, it will be a dream to try and hopefully do something decent. And if I were to make a comedy, I would try to go in the direction of Anchorman, when there's a lot of people, a lot of great cast members just throwing stuff against the wall and you figure it out in the edit, which, by the way, I don't understand how people make movies like that in the slightest, how you figure out the movie in the edit, which is why I take my hat off to documentarians who just like, okay, we're going to go shoot this for a year. Let's see where the story takes us.
We'll find it. Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you, I just, no, yeah. And in fact, I think one of the things that I don't think I'll ever do, but it's on my bucket list. I would love to do stand-up. I would absolutely love to do stand-up. And I know I'd be horrible at it, but I really love it. That's one thing I watch less than movies, but I remember, especially late 90s, and we talked about Bill Hicks a little bit in the last time we chatted, but I spent so much time, fantastic time, listening to all the greats and, the Richard Pryors and Eddie Murphys and everyone else. And I think it takes, as someone who, I have a music band, Biting Elbows, and we play occasionally, and we record albums and we get on the stage. And I get stage fright all the time because I feel comfortable on set. I'm not comfortable on stage, even though I have a great band behind me. We know what we're doing, and I learned everything really well, and we spend the rehearsals. But it's kind of easy because there is a band. To go on the stage and for an hour and a half entertain people with just things that you've written coming out of your mouth, that I think, to me, is the highest, most complicated form of art. Maybe that sounds a little weird, but I do feel that way.
No, well, the thing with stand-up is every other art form, there's a layer of artifice between you and the audience. You can go, oh, they don't like my story. Or, in case of films, they don't like my actors. They don't like my stupid screenwriter script. They don't like, if you're bombing in comedy, they don't like you. There's nowhere to hide. Could not pay me.
Similar in how when a director goes for a job, whatever it is, music video, commercial, or film, when you do a treatment and you do a presentation and you don't get it, it's because there's better people for this particular job, and you might be qualified. There's a million excuses.
Yeah.
Now, my wife used to be an actress when I met her, and she was doing really well here in Russia. I think when we married, that's when things stopped. And then she's like, all right, fine, I'll become a director. So now she makes movies. I have a competition in my own household. I love it.
Fantastic.
But she told me, I remember how she used to go all these castings, and she said exactly what you're saying right now, Josh. She said that when I don't get a job, it's because there's plenty of reasons. When an actor doesn't get a job, it's because you are not right. Your face isn't right. Your look isn't right. Your height, whatever, your hair, anything. It's so personal.
Right.
And like you said, there's nowhere to hide. So
it's a personal rejection. And I've been on, the panel of people who sit there as an actor comes in. And sometimes an actor comes in and the picture that they sent you is 10 years old. They've either gained or lost a lot of weight. I mean, they don't look like who they did before. And you just know immediately when they're not going to get this part. But
so
then,
what do you do at that point?
That's the point. I have been with people who just are terse and nasty and just send them away.
Yeah.
And I can't do that. I go through the motions and let them do whatever it is that they came to do and exchange, cordialities and all that kind of stuff and make them feel like they have a shot, even though the minute they walked in, they didn't have a shot. But that's not their fault, and you can't. I just don't think you can. I've really worked in this business long enough to see a lot of people who treat actors very badly. And
it doesn't make much sense, but
it's counterproductive, but also it's just mean.
You're being an asshole. It's fantastic. Joe, this is the second time we're speaking, so I don't presume to know you, but watching your films, you kind of get a feeling of what the director who made these things, what's their
personality.
What's the right term? Personality. Yeah, thank you. So it's very heartwarming to hear that's how you do it with actors. And again, I'm pretty new to this thing, but I've had the same approach because it just feels that they're spending time, their hopes and dreams This is their job audition. It's not an audition. It's their lifeline. And as I was starting out, I've seen people treat actors, as you were saying, just like, yeah, great, fuck off. And it just felt so disrespectful, unnecessarily so.
Yeah.
You win nothing by being an asshole. Nothing. All you win is maybe 15 minutes of your time.
It's also a power trip, Yeah. I can do it.
In that case, what does that say about you as a human being?
Well, it doesn't say much, but there's a lot of people who, use that ladder to get many rungs off the ground, and nobody's never given them any blowback until they had their first failure.
Right. Joe, I'm wondering, have you ever had the experience where, that person walked in and they're not the person you expected them to be when they walk in, and they're not going to get it. And you're watching because, you are. Joe is genuinely a nice guy. I hate to tell people that. But have you ever had the experience where in watching it, something about their performance has sparked you to, if not cast them in that part, cast them in something else?
Well, I'm always looking. That's the other short-sighted thing about just
right. Is that
people, is that's not the only part that you're ever going to have in your life to want to cast. And sometimes people come in and they're not quite right for this, but they have a quality. They have an ability that you think you could actually, use in some other part, and you don't want to alienate them. You like to be able to work with them. So I've had a lot of people who two pictures ago may have come in, but then, 2 pictures later, I said, oh, let's get, what's her name? Because here I have saved all the pieces, and they come in and they get the part. So the problem I have is that I tend to fall for actors, and so I end up using a lot of actors over and over again. And that, of course, cuts down on the number of people who are new who can come in, But at my rate, they're passing away rather quickly. So I have a lot of holes in my list.
I'm just trying to figure out who the young Dick Miller is. That's what
I don't know. Me too.
Have to find him. Got to find that guy. Ilya, what's next on your?
Next on the list is, so I had The Thing or City of God and about 15 other things. And I realized very late, I think it was after our, oh no, did I send it? I don't think I ever did.
You sent me a very late night email going, wait.
Yeah. I that thing in Gmail where it says, when you send a letter, it says undo, you have like 5 seconds.
Oh, do you?
In my case, it should be like 15 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I need that.
I might have to switch to Gmail. That's amazing.
It's it saved my butt quite a few times. But I later on emailed a film by James Ward Burkett called Coherence.
Yeah.
And that film it's one of the rare moments when I watched the movie. I remember it was on a list of someone put this. I don't want to say the genre because the genre, I guess, spoils quite a bit of it.
Yeah, actually don't, because that's a film that people will not have seen. And you're right. It gives something essential away if you find out what genre it is.
And so unfortunately, I knew the genre. I was like, oh, check this out, indie. Again, I could be completely mistaken, but I think it's a $50,000 movie.
At best, yeah.
Shot in the director's home over a period, I believe, 5 days, 9 actors, none of them who you'll recognize, I don't think. And that made it much nicer for me. I love stars and I love, familiar faces, just like we all do, the comfort of expectation. But with this one, I came in only knowing the genre, knowing that it's interesting and should be checking it out. And I did. And it's one of those films where right after I watched it, I started reading up everything I could about it. I found James Ward on Facebook. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write to him and thank him for this film. And I did. And he replied. He was very nice. And in fact, I love the film so much that I think a couple of years later, I wrote to him and saying, look, I made a little film. And there's a room in this movie that a character passes through. And I want to put all the things that I love, music, books. I want to get posters of everything. And that just as all the things that inspire me. And I would love to have a poster for Coherence. And I don't know who has the rights. Like, I've got the rights. You came to the right place. Here you go. He sent me the quality JPEG, and it's in the movie. It's got a bigger poster because
great.
I think it's just so nice to be able to just say thank you. Because that's what it's so amazing that you watch something, it inspires you, then you make something coming up from whatever you've seen, and you pass that on and share. It is like an energy. this infinity loop that you really got to throw in good things in there. You can't just be taking, you got to be giving it a little bit. And I thought that'd be a nice little, not that can't imagine many people saw my movie and be like, oh, I got to check out that poster. But I have seen, there was a Reddit post a long while back where people dissected everything, that they press pause and they went through all the posters and all this stuff. And I think I came in that thread and just added some of the things they missed. And I know some people must have watched that movie because here you go. And I think it's just nice to be able to do that. But Coherence, the more I read about it, the more it blew me away how James Ward Burkett, he is the writer of Pirates of the Caribbean. He's the writer of Rango, which I think is a phenomenal cartoon. And he wanted to become director. So he wrote, directed a tiny little film that is much more, I don't think I've ever seen, I think there's 2 movies that really work on such a tiny budget that have blown me away. It's this and Jeremy Saulnier's second film, Blue Ruin. Blue Ruin, I think, also have a poster in that wall in Hardcourt, again, because it's just, it's a terrific piece of filmmaking. But Coherence does so much with so little. It's very simply shot, not necessarily bad. It's just, you can tell that it was cheap. I think it's simple cameras, lots of yellow light. There's pretty much one location, which is the hardest thing to do. Make an interesting movie in one location. If I ever got I could not come up with an idea good enough for that, but I'd love to make, again, all these films, I'd love to make a movie like this. I'd love to make a movie like Coherence, where there's literally 8 people talking in a room. And obviously we have the beast, the monolithic 12 Angry Men is the best example of one room and that's it, just dialogue.
Well, One Night in Miami is pretty good recently.
Well, they move around. Remember, they go to a club and they go.
Oh, that's true. They do leave.
Yeah.
It's close.
What I'm thinking of, have you seen, and she is a friend of the show, Karen Kusama's The Invitation?
Absolutely. Twice.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I mean, that has got some phenomenal, I did not know anything about it. I switched it on. And by the end, my wife is not a big fan of things that thrill in such a way, but the tension in that movie is absolutely terrific. And I mean, I love how you know that the chance of this being a fake out is very little, so you know it's going to end in a dramatic way.
Badly, yes.
But, yeah, the way it does so is, and the sort of the action finale, fantastic, and especially the final shot with all the red lights. That's a spoiler, but semi-spoiler.
Actually, I'm coming to you from one of those houses.
Yeah, his house is actually in that shot.
Yeah, the house they shot it in is over there, and I'm here, and yeah.
It's strange when I was first driving through LA, my first trips there, and just driving around looking at all these names and going, hey, I love the names of streets in LA. It's just, I love the Spanish part. It's just so, because back in Russia, it's all named after communists, everything. And not all those communists were great. And some were pretty outright horrible. So it's great when I'm driving around, I'm seeing, hey, those beautiful names be the neighborhoods that I start to kind of realize, oh, this was here. And I saw this, it just feels incredibly familiar.
Yeah.
It's such a cinematic city, even though it's kind of very, very simple and one note, it would appear at first. It really isn't. There's everything you can find. I remember looking at a map from some studio, a map of things where you can shoot things for what in LA and around LA. And it was just like, and here we have the Arabian Desert section. And here you have this. I was going, yep, that's how they did them. And it's very inspiring. But come back to Coherence, I remember reading that he had a script. He had all the plot points and all the beats figured out, but he never gave the actors the script. They would show up and they say, all right, so today your goal is to go there and do this. Your goal is to stop them, but ultimately to give in. So a lot of it is improvised. And it feels very, very, very real when you're watching it. It feels like real people talking about a situation.
Yeah.
And the situation itself is incredible. Again, I'll be very careful not to say more than necessary. I just highly recommend everybody check out Coherence. If you like smart, taut little, is it taut?
Yeah.
Taut little thrillers?
Yep.
Then Coherence is...
So Josh, where do you think that can be found?
I believe it's. I should have looked at I was just looking it up on IMDb, and I was pleased to see that IMDb does not give up the true genre of the film. So when people look it up, it will not ruin it for them. But I believe, it's on Prime. It is on Prime.
Okay, great. Because
I love how our Google prices are in Russian. So in Google, I can watch Coherence for literally less than $1.
Oh,
officially.
Officially, yes.
Which is very good, considering I'm from a very pirate-heavy country, and I think I told you when I started.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So the piracy runs deep, and and it's nice how now we have all the Netflix and there's a lot of Russian online theater streamers opening up who are buying things. We have all HBO here legally, and people are like, "What? You can pay and people get money?" And I don't recall if we talked about this or not, but I love how all that streamers really needed to do is become more convenient. People who are never used to pay for entertainment or pay pirates for their entertainment can now 2 clicks and you're watching something, and 2 clicks and you're watching something in high quality, in 4K, for example.
Well, that's the big difference, because with piracy, of course, quality is the worst. I mean, when I was young, I used to go to people's houses and they had taped movies off the TV, and there were like 4 movies on one tape, which means that everything is blurry. And
SLP,
hear
baby.
it or whatever.
SLP.
It's the slowest speed, and it's just awful. And it's like, I said, you can't watch things. And I found some of my own movies were on this thing. I said, you can't. I'll go buy you a copy. I don't want you watching this.
But what's amazing is we did. I mean, I remember as a student living on a very, very tight budget, it made me so happy that I could fit 3 or 4 movies onto one videotape if you just slowed it down, and you just sort of lie to yourself about the quality. But
you can't tell the actors apart. What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what we endured just to see a glimpse of a movie, back in the day.
I must have seen a few of your films, Joe, on.
I'm sure you have,
tapes.
And I'm owed money.
You are.
Imagine watching Lawrence of Arabia pan and scan in SLP mode. That's the first time you see the film.
It's a souvenir of listening to the soundtrack.
Kind of, yeah. Well, it doesn't sound as good either. Dear God.
I spoiled so many films for myself, having to watch, and not just bad quality, not just SLP, but films that were taped in the theater.
Mm.
Oh yeah, right.
Worse, yeah, shaky.
I've seen great movies, and I think the last time I did that, I was all right. This is very probably not a good thing to say for someone who wants to make a career in America, but I couldn't wait to see Kill Bill. I just couldn't wait. I couldn't possibly wait, and we had there was a DVD for sale, and I was like, all right, I'm just sorry, Quentin, I just have to. So I bought it and I watched Kill Bill Volume 1. That was recorded in a theater in America with shitty Russian overdubs. Just you can't overdub Tarantino. You can't. Just learn English. That's the thing.
Now they are talking about cheeseburgers for 5 minutes.
And it was the worst. I mean, to me, Kill Bill Part 2 is so much better because I watched it in the theater like you really should. And I hate myself for it. It's one of the worst things
It's all in the past. You have to forgive yourself.
But I'll never enjoy it. Unfortunately, I'll never have that first amazing experience as one can.
I know a guy who works as he does
hits people in the head with a hammer.
No. he does closed captioning on films. And he was just weeping the other day because they send you these terrible little videos, often black and white, usually pan and scan.
Yep.
So he has seen the new James Bond film, but he's seen it on something the size of a phone, half the image in black and white, and he's just heartbroken. But that
shouldn't have watched it.
Well, he had to do the closed captioning.
His job is to lose enjoyment of films. I think that job should come with like a thing where if you're forced, if not forced, if you have to watch a good movie and close caption it, you should get paid more.
Yeah, I agree. It should be.
Does your friend put captions in that say birds singing?
I
eerie music begins.
I assume,
it's maddening. Sometimes you have to watch the subtitles because that's the only subtitles there are. And if there's subtitles for the deaf, then they include all the sound effects.
And it's music.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's very annoying.
I've started watching a lot of films with subtitles. I'm watching my wife who speaks English well and understands, but it just makes things a little more, just makes sure she doesn't miss anything.
Sure.
And I've grown accustomed. And I think especially with good films or films that are well-written dialogue, it really helps. It really helps kind of cement what good dialogue looks on the page.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm kind of too used to them by now, which is probably not a good thing, because especially if it's a visual movie, you really want to not be distracted by all that stuff. But I like how people have grown accustomed to subs, and now Americans are open to them. I think 20 years of texting have paid off.
That may be.
Because there were no films. I can't remember, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. That was maybe one of the only big hits that had subtitles throughout. I don't think anything else in America ever.
Well, that's because we used to dub everything up until about the 70s. All the foreign movies were dubbed, even the Fellini's and the Bergmans and all those things. They're all dubbed versions. They were very well dubbed. And in some movies, there is so much crosstalk going on that you can't actually get it all with the subtitles. You have to have layered dialogue. But for whatever reason, America decided they didn't like that anymore. And they also, at the same time, decided they didn't like subtitles.
Or foreign films.
Which is how Roger Corman got to distribute Fellini and Godard and Truffaut, because the big studios didn't want them anymore because nobody was going. So what next? What's next?
Are we? Wait.
Was that the last one?
Let's see.
I'm gonna have to pad this one out.
I don't think so. Weren't you thinking of maybe running it all as one?
Of course, yeah.
Let's SLP it.
Yeah, well, SLP.
Very meta of us, yeah.
This episode in SLP.
That was the last one. I like that we ended on Coherence rather than Anchorman. I find it very hard to make a list of, like we used to make mixtapes, or when I do a record, I got to put the songs in order. It's the toughest thing in the world for me. And somehow magically, I ended up on a very special little, fairly unknown little movie, which I do hope your listeners spend a little energy to check out. I'm pretty sure
it is well worth it. And it's inspirational too. If you're sort of, there's still that thing in the era we live in. There's still that sort of intimidation factor in terms of making a movie. And as movies like that, and Invitation, other show, it's like you can make a movie in your house with your friends.
And people will watch it, and you will make money.
Yeah,
you make it back, because I think for a period it was available for rent and for sale on his website.
Okay,
movie.com, if I'm not mistaken, and you could just get it. Because the first time I watched this thing it was unavailable anywhere, so I did pirate it, but then I did buy it from the website.
Good. Okay.
I don't think I admitted it to him in the Facebook.
That's right. You've atoned.
That's right. You have definitely atoned in many, many ways.
Well, thank you,
Lord. Thank you for joining us, man. This was an absolute blast.
Pleasure is all mine.
And like I said,
so let us know if you ever get to this side of the Atlantic.
I absolutely will. I would love dinner will be on me, or lunch, or coffee.
We're good for that.
It will be fun. It will be a lot of fun, guys. Thank you so much. It means a lot coming here and talking about my very serious list of movies.
No, it was wonderful. So we've been talking to. I love saying this. We'll have to. I don't know. Maybe when we put it on the page, I think we'll just say nobody director. Ilya Naishuller.
Don't do that.
Because somebody's going to look at it and go, "Why would I want to talk to? I want to hear."
Well, BBC Russia did a little piece to coincide with the release of the movie here, and they said no longer a nobody. Ilya Naishuller. I was like, I'll take it. Why not?
Nobody is now somebody.
Nobody's else. Yes. Now that's the sequel. Somebody is the sequel. Anyway, we've been talking with the director of Nobody, Ilya Naishuller, and thank you so much. The film is now out. It is actually showing in some theaters, and really,
right?
You what?
It's strange to hear that nowadays.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, we're hoping it continues because it's kind of iffy.
Yeah, but this is a movie. I gotta say, I've seen a lot of movies this past year where I've gone, oh, it would have been nice to. But this is probably top of the list of movies I wish I had seen in a theater for the first time. It's an absolute blast. Go see it with a buddy. By the way, might I say, have a few drinks before you go in. It's
alcohol friendly. It really is. It's one of those.
Yeah, it's an alcohol friendly movie. It's just a blast, and it's been wonderful talking to you. So thank you. And yeah.
Good luck, Ilya.
Come back when you've done Nobodies. Our show was recorded from several well-stocked bunkers. We can't wait to get back to beautiful downtown Burbank. We're the official podcast of trailersfromhell.com, the best damn movie website there is. Our engineer is the composer Don Barrett, who also transmogrified, produced, and created our theme song. This is Josh Olson for The Movies That Made Me. Stay safe out there, folks.